I can't marry a lowlife man like you. Elias Thorne never imagined the woman he loved would publicly shatter him. Not in front of the world, but in front of their world. 1 second, he was on one knee, beneath the cold, indifferent gleam of the Vance Citadel's grand ballroom, holding a ring that represented years of sacrifice and hope. The next, Serafina Vance's voice, sharp as a shard of ice, cut through the opulent silence. I can't marry a lowlife man like you. A ripple of laughter, quiet at first, then cruel, spread through the elite gathering as phones rose like digital vultures, ready to feast on his humiliation. But beneath the venom of her words, Elias saw something far more chilling flicker in Serafina's eyes, fear. Not of him, but of something else entirely. Fear of what might happen if she dared to defy the script. As Elias Thorne staggered to his feet, his heart a raw, bleeding wound, he caught a chilling whisper between Serafina and her mother, Eleanor Vance, the contract, removing him cleanly. This wasn't just rejection, it was an execution. This was the beginning of something far bigger, a systemic injustice unfolding before his very eyes. Tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? If this story resonates with the fighter in you, don't forget to subscribe for more tales of resilience and triumph against the odds. Elias Thorne replayed the moment again and again. He stood outside the towering glass and steel of the Vance Citadel, the cold night wind a cruel caress against his thin, borrowed suit. Below him, the city hummed, oblivious. Traffic, laughter, music, life went on, as if his entire world hadn't just imploded. But it had. It had shattered into a million pieces. The instant Serafina's voice echoed across the polished marble, clear and sharp, bouncing off crystal chandeliers like a final, damning verdict. Even now, the memory burned behind his eyes, the soft gasp from an elderly guest, the widening, predatory smirk on Serafina's brother's face. The way Eleanor Vance, Serafina's mother, didn't even bother to hide her satisfaction, tilting her champagne glass as if she'd been orchestrating this moment for years. Elias didn't run at first. He couldn't. His knees had locked, the open ring box still clutched in his palm, the diamond, a symbol of his foolish hope, trembling under the harsh spotlight. He remembered Serafina stepping back, physically distancing herself, just as she had emotionally, long before tonight. He simply hadn't seen it. You should have known better, someone muttered behind him, a snicker following. Record this, it's going viral. That was when Elias finally moved. He didn't remember putting the ring back in his pocket. He didn't remember pushing past the impeccably dressed guests, who didn't bother hiding their disdain. He only remembered the final sound before the elevator doors sealed shut. Serafina's faint whisper, not meant for him, but carrying anyway. Is it done now? Can we finally move on with the contract? A second voice, colder, sharper, Eleanor's, he'll disappear. Men like him always do. You just gave him the final push. Elias slammed the elevator button with shaking fingers, the doors closing, sealing him away from the polished, privileged world he had so desperately tried to belong to. He thought the public humiliation was the worst part. Now, he wasn't so sure. Hours earlier, before this nightmare, he'd stood in front of his tiny bathroom mirror, adjusting a borrowed tie. His hands had trembled from nerves, not fear. He believed tonight would change his life for the better. He imagined Serafina saying yes, remembered the soft, genuine smile she wore when they first started dating. He imagined her choosing him, despite their worlds being nothing alike. She used to tell him he grounded her, that he was the only person who saw her as more than a Vance heiress. He believed her. He built dreams around her words. He molded his future around a hope he now knew was manufactured, a cruel deception. He'd spent weeks planning. He'd sold his father's old motorcycle, his last tangible connection to the man, to afford that ring. He'd consulted her friends about her favorite flowers, her favorite colors, her dream proposal. Every detail was meant to show her how deeply he loved her. But none of it mattered. As he stood on the sidewalk now, watching taxis blur past through tear-filled eyes, a greater question gnawed at him. Why did she stay with him for 2 years if she despised him so much? The rain started lightly, soft droplets scattering across the pavement. A passing car sprayed water along the curb, soaking the hem of his pants. But Elias barely flinched. He felt numb, suspended between heartbreak and a dawning, terrifying disbelief. He pulled out his phone. Dozens of notifications lit the screen, messages from co-workers, college friends, even numbers he didn't recognize. Most were short bursts of shock or pity. Some were jokes, a few were outright cruel. But the ones that hurt most were the photos and videos. Already online, the moment Serafina rejected him, slowed down, edited, captioned with phrases like "know your place," and "when the goldfish dates the shark." His humiliation was now entertainment. Strangers were laughing at the ruins of his life. He shoved the phone into his pocket, his chest tightening. He wanted to go home. He wanted to sleep for a week, maybe a month. He wanted time to erase everything. But his feet didn't move toward the train station. They carried him in another direction. Toward the past. His father's memory rose unbidden. Not the warm parts, the laughter, the smell of gasoline on his clothes, the quiet pride he carried in his small auto shop. Elias remembered the pain, the scandal, the way people whispered that his father was a thief who cheated a business partner. They never had proof, but rumors were enough. The auto shop closed. His father's health declined. Elias watched the strongest man he knew break under a weight he didn't deserve. There was always more to that story. Elias felt it deep in his bones. And tonight, hearing Eleanor Vance's cold confidence, the strange, chilling comment about the contract, it sent a shiver down his spine. He thought Serafina loved him. He thought he was finally building a future, separate from the shadow of his father's disgrace. But what if he had been chosen for a reason? What if this wasn't just about him, but about a pattern, a system designed to keep men like him down? That had nothing to do with love. He stumbled toward the bus stop, rain lashing down, each drop a cold accusation. His breath plumed in the brutal night air, but his mind was a storm, replaying Serafina Thorne's calculated moves, her sudden, intense interest in Vance's legacy garage, her casual questions about the old deeds, the property lines, the gentle, almost insistent way she pushed for her family's lawyers to review everything for his own benefit. Back then, Elias had been touched, flattered. Now, a wave of nausea washed over him. He waited for the last bus, a ghost in the city's glow. Neon reflections bled across the wet pavement, each passing minute carving a deeper, jagged crack in his heart, a chasm of betrayal. Puzzle pieces, once scattered, now clicked into a horrifying mosaic he desperately wished he could unsee. When he finally boarded, collapsing onto a rattling seat by the window, his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a notification, not a message from a friend. It was a short, anonymous text. "Get out while you still can. They never meant for you to stay. Freedom Heights is next." Elias stared at the words, his breath catching in his throat. Someone knew something dangerous, something connected to Serafina, something connected to his father, Arthur Vance. The bus rumbled through the quiet, rain-slicked streets, but the tempest in his mind was louder, a cacophony of betrayal, shattered trust, and a mystery he was never meant to uncover. He squeezed his eyes shut, swallowing the bitter ache. Everything he thought he knew about the last 2 years felt like a cruel script, written by unseen hands. And though his heart screamed for peace, for numbness, for oblivion, his instincts, honed by generations of struggle, whispered a truth he could no longer ignore. This wasn't just rejection, this was the chilling, undeniable beginning of a fight for everything he held sacred. The apartment felt like a cage when Elias pushed the door open, the hinges groaning a familiar, mournful protest. Normally, that sound was a comfort, grounding him in the worn familiarity of home. Tonight, it scraped across his raw nerves like a rusty blade. He stepped inside, slowly, letting the suffocating silence settle around him like a shroud, heavy and suffocating. The cheap lamp on his side table flickered to life, casting a weak, sickly yellow glow that barely pierced the oppressive shadows. He stood in the middle of the living room, still soaked, unable to decide whether to scream, until his lungs gave out or simply collapse into the abyss. The proposal scene replayed behind his eyes with agonizing clarity. Serafina's dismissive stare, a mask of ice, the way her mouth curled around the word lowlife, the laughter that followed, a chilling chorus rehearsed by fate itself, echoing the scorn his community had faced for decades. His phone buzzed again, a jarring intrusion that snapped him out of the spiraling darkness, just long enough to pull the device from his pocket. More messages, more videos, more strangers, their faces contorted in judgment, saying everything they thought they knew about him, but understood nothing. One thumbnail froze as he hovered over it, the exact moment Serafina stepped away, her expression a venomous cocktail of disdain and something else. Fear. He couldn't shake it. He hurled the phone onto the couch before its relentless vibrations could shake the last vestiges of hope from him. The apartment was silent once more, save for the tired hum of the old refrigerator and the distant, muffled rumble of traffic several floors below. He peeled off his wet jacket, the fabric clinging to him like a second skin, and sank into the couch, the cushions swallowing him whole, as if they could make him disappear. His mind drifted back to the beginning, to the day he met Serafina Thorne. He remembered it with stark, brutal clarity, clearer than the public humiliation of the proposal. He had been volunteering at a community outreach event in Freedom Heights, tuning up cars for those who couldn't afford it. She had glided in, sunglasses obscuring her eyes despite the overcast sky, her heels clicking on the cracked pavement like she was walking a runway, not the heart of his neighborhood. She'd handed him her keys, demanding an oil change, but her voice had been strangely soft, almost hesitant, as if she wasn't used to asking for anything. They talked, they laughed. He made her smile in a way he wouldn't see again for months, brief, fleeting moments that now felt like stolen sunbeams, not genuine warmth. Back then, she hadn't seemed cruel. She hadn't seemed trapped. She was simply lonely, at least. That's what he desperately wanted to believe. As the months bled into years, he fell deeper, missing the glaring red flags that now blazed like neon signs, the way she flinched whenever he mentioned his father, Arthur Vance, the way she rushed through conversations when her mother, the formidable matriarch of Thorne Industries, called, the way she insisted on knowing every detail about Vance's legacy garage, but brushed off his questions about her family's sprawling, shadowy empire. There had been a night, he could still feel the chill of it, when she'd asked him if he'd ever consider signing over parts of the property to her family. Just for safekeeping, she'd purred. She'd framed it as love, security, a future together. He hadn't signed. Something had felt profoundly wrong. But he never, in his darkest nightmares, imagined it was part of a meticulously crafted plan. Not until tonight. He pressed the heels of his palms into his eyes, trying to push the searing memories away, but they flooded him faster, a relentless torrent. His father's face appeared next, a blend of weariness and unyielding pride. He could almost hear his voice, a voice he hadn't heard in years, calm, steady, trying so hard to be strong. Even as everything fell apart, Arthur Vance had been destroyed by rumors, by a smear campaign tied to a partner he never named. Elias had never pressed for details, unwilling to witness the pain resurface in the last man he respected. Now, he wished he had. His father died with his integrity questioned, Vance's legacy garage nearly ruined, his livelihood stolen. Elias had always believed it was bad luck, an unfortunate misunderstanding. But after what he'd witnessed tonight, after Serafina's chilling whisper about a contract, those old facts twisted into something far more sinister, a generational injustice. He stood abruptly, needing to move, needing to breathe. The apartment felt suffocating, the air thick with memory and a terrifying new possibility. He stumbled into his bedroom, opened the closet, and reached for a cardboard box shoved onto the top shelf. Dust coated his fingers as he pulled it down. Carrying it to the kitchen table, he hadn't opened this box in years, not since his father's funeral, not since he buried the truth. Elias opened the ancestral chest, the fine layer of history clinging to his fingertips as he pulled out a worn wooden box, a vault of forgotten truths, untouched since the day his father was silenced. He carried it to the heavy oak table. Inside were faded blueprints of a dream, documents of a life dedicated to community, and a letter sealed with his name. Written across the front in his father's unwavering hand. Elijah froze, his breath hitched, and for a moment, the world felt too quiet, too heavy. He slid into a worn chair and broke the seal. The paper crinkled, A whisper from the past, as he unfolded it. His father's words, etched in wavering ink, stared back. My son, if you are reading this, then I was not strong enough to fix what was stolen from our people. There are forces who coveted our community's land for reasons they will never admit. They systematically destroyed my name, my reputation, to seize it. I don't want them to destroy yours. Be vigilant, Elijah. Protect our legacy. Protect our truth. Elijah's hand trembled. Reverend Josiah Cole never spoke with such gravity. Not unless the threat had been existential. He continued reading. A woman came to me before everything went wrong. She claimed she wanted to help, but I saw the predatory ambition behind her manufactured kindness. Her name was Vivian Thorne, the letters blurred. Vivian Thorne. Vivian Thorne, Seraphina's mother. His chest tightened, a vice grip. He clutched the edge of the table until his knuckles whitened. His father had warned him years before he ever met Seraphina that Vivian Thorne was deeply involved in the calculated campaign that dismantled their family's legacy. He once thought coincidence was cruel. Now, he realized it was strategy. He set the letter down, staring at the curling edges. Was Seraphina part of her mother's scheme from the beginning, or had Vivian used her, a pawn in a larger game, pushing her into a relationship meant to secure Elijah's consent on documents he was never meant to question? His phone buzzed again from the couch. One buzz, two, three, reluctantly. He walked over and checked the screen. A comment notification popped up on a viral video. He should disappear. Guys like him never learn. His jaw clenched. He scrolled through more comments, some mocking, some cruel, some outright dangerous, but one stood out, a beacon in the noise. A message request from an unknown account. They tried to ruin your father. They'll try to ruin you too. Don't ignore this. Find the truth. His fingers hovered. He swallowed hard. This was no longer heartbreak. It was a warning, a trail, a beginning. He looked around his tiny apartment, every crack, every stain, every piece of furniture worn by years of struggle. This place held more honesty than any gilded room he had stepped into. With the Thornes, he didn't feel powerless anymore. He felt awakened. But beneath the rising determination, grief still sat heavy in his chest. He had loved Seraphina for who he thought she was. He had imagined a future with her, imagined building something real, despite their differences. Now, he couldn't tell which parts of their relationship had been genuine, and which had been manipulation, tied to a contract he wasn't supposed to question. He sat on the couch again, the apartment dark except for the dim kitchen light behind him. He stared at the letter on the table, the ink glowing faintly. His father had seen the danger coming. Elijah had walked right into it. The betrayal cut deeper than Seraphina's rejection. It reached into the past, into his bloodline, into everything he thought he understood about the world. And somewhere in the shadows of that realization, something hardened inside him. He wasn't disappearing. Not this time, not the way they expected. Tonight, they had humiliated him. Tomorrow, he would begin to unearth the truth and reclaim what was stolen. The next morning crept in slowly, pale light leaking through Elijah's thin curtains like it was afraid to enter. He barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Seraphina's face, perfect makeup, flawless hair, and a stare, cold enough to shatter whatever remained of the man who once believed she loved him. But now that the initial shock had dulled into a raw, throbbing ache, something else demanded his attention, the letter from his father. He sat at the kitchen table. The letter unfolded in front of him. His father's handwriting seemed more haunting in daylight. Each sentence a ghost whispering truths Elijah wished weren't real. A woman named Vivian Thorne. His father had written that line with such certainty, as if he knew it would matter one day. And it did, more than Elijah ever wanted it to. The old Cole's Legacy Center suddenly felt like a crime scene instead of a relic of his childhood. Elijah hadn't visited it in years, not since the day it was unjustly shut down. He didn't want the memories, the pitying glances from old community members, the empty halls that once held the heart of his father's vision. But now, the center wasn't just a memory. It was a battleground for truth, and he needed answers. He grabbed his jacket, shoved the letter into his pocket, and left the apartment. The morning air was crisp, but felt harsh against his exhausted skin. The city was waking up, cars honking, coffee shops opening, people rushing past him, with lives that had nothing to do with heartbreak or systemic betrayal. For a moment, he envied their normality. The Coles Legacy Center sat on a quiet street, corners overgrown with weeds. The old sign, Reverend Josiah Coles Legacy Center, hung crooked after years of neglect. Elijah paused at the entrance, fingers brushing the rough surface of the metal door. He remembered helping his father paint that sign one summer, remembered the pride in his father's eyes when they stepped back to admire their work. Now, the paint was chipped, the colors faded, and the pride replaced by the ghost of a legacy stolen. He pushed the door open. The hinges groaned like they remembered him, thus billowed in the stale air, and sunlight filtered through cracked windows, catching on abandoned tools and old oil stains. Elijah stepped inside slowly, every footstep echoing in the cavernous silence. It felt wrong, seeing the space this empty, like someone had carved out the soul of the center and left only the shell. He walked toward his father's old desk in the corner, where paperwork lay scattered beneath. A thick layer of history coated the forgotten archives as Elijah Vance sifted through faded deeds, community petitions, and handwritten accounts. Nothing immediately screamed injustice until his gaze snagged on a small, worn photograph taped to the side of a dusty workbench. It was him, a young Elijah, beaming, a tiny fist clutching a wrench far too large, standing proudly beside his father, a man whose smile held the weight of a community's hope. He swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat, as he continued his search. "Haven't seen you here in years, son." A voice, raspy with age, startled him. Elijah spun around, his heart leaping. An elder stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on a carved walking stick. Elder Hayes, the name surfaced instantly, the venerable community leader, whose wisdom had anchored Heritage Heights for generations. His face, a roadmap of life's trials, was etched with time, but his eyes, sharp as obsidian, held a knowing glint. "Didn't expect anyone to be here," Elder Hayes continued, stepping inside, his gaze sweeping the room. "Thought Thorne Holdings was tearing this place down soon." "Yeah," Elijah replied, his voice barely a whisper. "I heard." Elder Hayes studied him for a long moment, then tapped his stick against the worn floorboards. "Your father didn't deserve what happened." The words struck Elijah with the force of a physical blow, echoing the unspoken pain he'd carried for years. You remember?" "Everyone remembers," Elder Hayes affirmed, his voice resonating with quiet power. "A good man, a pillar of this community, brought down. People pretend they didn't see it, but I saw things back then, strange things." Elijah's pulse quickened, a cold dread coiling in his gut. "What kind of strange things?" Elder Hayes walked slowly toward the workbench, his eyes scanning the room as if replaying a painful film reel of the past. "The week before your father's reputation was systematically dismantled, I noticed two figures in tailored suits, coming here late at night. They weren't customers. They didn't belong anywhere near a community hub like this. One was tall, cloaked in a dark trench coat. The other kept glancing around, like a predator expecting to be caught." Elijah absorbed the chilling description, a knot tightening in his stomach. "Did you tell anyone, son?" Elder Hayes asked, a bitter smirk twisting his lips. "Those figures weren't the kind anyone dared to speak about. The moment I saw them, I knew trouble was brewing for our community." Elijah's stomach clenched. "Did you recognize them?" "Not at the time," Elder Hayes admitted, his gaze distant. "But a few years later, when I saw a certain woman on television, during a press conference about urban renewal." He hesitated, his eyes meeting Elijah's. "Let's just say she carried the same chilling presence as the woman who visited your father. The day before everything fell apart, Senator Evelyn Thorne. It had to be Evelyn." Elijah felt his chest constrict, a wave of righteous anger beginning to simmer beneath the surface. "Why would she be involved with my father?" Elder Hayes shook his head slowly. "I can't tell you the why, not fully. But I can tell you the result. After her visit, everything went downhill. A week later, the whispers started. A month later, this community hub, your father's legacy, was silenced." Elijah ran a hand through his hair, trying to process the elder's words. the pieces of a long-buried puzzle clicking into place. Everything aligned perfectly to be coincidence. His father, a champion of Heritage Heights, had been systematically destroyed, and Senator Evelyn Thorne had been at the heart of it. Now, years later, Serena Thorne, Evelyn's daughter, had been by his side, pushing paperwork at him without explanation. This wasn't coincidence. This was generational manipulation, a calculated assault on his family and his people. "Be careful, son," Elder Hayes warned, his voice low and grave. "Families like the Thornes don't lose, not without taking down anyone who stands in their way." Elijah nodded, though a cold fear coiled tightly in his chest, quickly replaced by a burning resolve. "Thank you," he managed. Elder Hayes left, the rhythmic tap of his stick fading into the silence. Elijah stood there for a long moment, surrounded by dust, the ghosts of the past, and the crushing weight of a truth that demanded action. He turned back to the workbench, his search now fueled by a fierce determination. Beneath old community manuals, he uncovered something he hadn't seen before, a thick folder, starkly labeled Heritage Heights Urban Renewal Initiative. He opened it, and his heart jolted. The logo on the first page belonged to Thorne Holdings. Blueprints, land valuations, notes about acquisition strategy. His father's property, this very community hub, was a prime target, had been for years. As he flipped through, he found a page with a section marked "Heir Signature Required." The name printed below was his, Elijah Vance. He hadn't signed anything, but the page looked prepared, waiting. His mind raced. Serena had asked him about signing random documents. Her mother had been involved in destroying his father. This community land had been coveted. It all led to one chilling conclusion. That made Elijah's skin crawl. He had been part of their plan since the moment he met Serena, a pawn in a decades-long game. He closed the folder, his pulse pounding in his ears. The truth was too monumental to ignore now. This wasn't the aftermath of a bad breakup. This was the continuation of a fight his father had lost, and a fight Elijah had unknowingly stepped into. He pocketed the folder, locked the community hub behind him, and walked out into the cold, unforgiving daylight. His steps were heavy, but his purpose grew clearer, sharper, with each one. Senator Evelyn Thorne had manipulated his father. Serena Thorne had manipulated him. The Thorne family had been playing along. Ruthless game of power and displacement. But Elijah wasn't the same. Vulnerable boy who watched his father break. He wasn't the naive man who believed love could erase the chasms of class, power, and systemic injustice. He was his father's son, and he was done being their pawn. As he walked toward the bus stop, his phone buzzed again. A new message, a single, cryptic sentence. "If you want real answers, you're looking in the right direction. But you're not alone." Elijah stared at the message, a fresh wave of tension crawling across his skin. Someone knew what he'd discovered. Someone was watching. Someone wanted him to continue. But were they a friend? An ally in this fight for justice, or just another piece in the Thornes' deadly game? Either way, the path forward was no longer about personal heartbreak. It was about truth, justice, and the legacy his father had died trying to protect. Elijah didn't go home right away. The city felt different now, sharper around the edges, like every stranger's glance held a warning he couldn't yet decipher. His father's faded photograph weighed heavily in his pocket, and the Thorne Holdings folder inside his backpack felt like a live bomb. He wasn't prepared to carry it, but he had no choice. The fight for Heritage Heights had just begun. This wasn't just a family feud. It was the echo of generations, a predatory past reaching out with iron claws, dragging Elijah into a battle he never asked for. He drove straight to the gleaming fortress of Thorne and Associates. If the faded folder from his father's old workshop held truth, then the Thornes had been meticulously plotting to seize the Willow Creek land, using him as a pawn. Long before that public humiliation, he needed answers, and he needed them now. The Thorne Tower loomed, a cold, monolithic monument of glass and steel, casting a long shadow over the city, over his history. Elijah paused at the threshold, a security guard's gaze like a physical weight, as if sensing the tempest brewing within him. But Elijah squared his shoulders, a silent vow hardening his resolve. and stepped inside. His heart hammered, a drumbeat of defiance against the fear that gnawed. He had no appointment, no legal counsel, no grand strategy, only an unshakable conviction. He wouldn't leave without the truth. The receptionist, a porcelain doll behind a polished desk, looked up. Her smile, a brittle mask of practiced indifference, was clearly designed for those who didn't belong. "Can I help you?" "I need to speak with someone about the Willow Creek land." Elijah's voice, though strained, held firm. Her eyes, cold as ice, flickered with a chilling recognition. Surprise, then a glacial shift. "Please wait here." Her hushed calls, though muffled, vibrated with urgency, a secret language he wasn't meant to decipher. But he felt the tension radiating from her, a silent alarm. Finally, a tall man, impeccably tailored, glided towards him. His smile was a predator's, too smooth, to practice to be anything but a lie. "Mr. Vance," the lawyer purred, extending a hand that felt more like a trap. "I'm Silas Thorne. Please, follow me." Elijah followed him into a conference room, a mausoleum of corporate power, stark white walls, cold chrome, a deliberate sterility designed to intimidate. A spotless glass table reflected their grim faces. Silas shut the door with a soft, ominous click. "I understand you have questions," he began, his voice a silken thread. "I found documents." Elijah cut him off. Elijah declared, slamming the folder onto the pristine table. "Documents about my father's land. Documents that bear my name." Silas didn't flinch. Instead, he sighed, a condescending exhalation, as if Elijah were a petulant child, misunderstanding a simple truth. "Mr. Vance, you must understand that your father's property is part of an ongoing redevelopment project. Our firm merely handles the legal logistics." Elijah's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching in his temple. "My father was destroyed because of this project." Elijah's voice cracked with raw pain. Silas's expression remained impassive. "Your father faced financial issues of his own making." "Mr. Vance." That cold, clinical dismissal ignited a fire in Elijah's gut. "You don't get to rewrite history. I know Genevieve Thorne visited him before everything fell apart, and I know your firm prepared paperwork with my name on it, used before I ever met her daughter." A flicker, swift as a snake's tongue, passed through Silas's eyes. Then the predator's smile returned, practiced and utterly hollow. "Mr. Vance, I believe emotions are clouding your recollections. If you'd like, we can arrange for a legal professional to walk you through any misunderstandings." Elijah leaned forward, his gaze unyielding. "I want copies of every document your office has ever drafted involving the Willow Creek land." Now, Silas's expression hardened, the mask finally cracking. "That won't be possible. Those documents are confidential." The words struck Elijah like a physical blow, a concrete wall slamming shut. He felt his muscles coil, tightening with suppressed fury. His fists clenched, knuckles white. "They involve me and my father, still confidential." Silas replied, his voice chillingly calm. "And Mr. Vance, your presence here today is rather concerning. You've been trending online since last night. Some of our staff were worried you might come here, upset. We want to ensure your behavior doesn't escalate." Elijah's blood ran cold. "Are you calling me unstable?" "Not at all," Silas purred, a viper's gentleness. "But you must understand, you're emotionally compromised. Should you choose to pursue this matter aggressively, we'd have no choice but to protect our interests, even if that means presenting evidence that paints you in a less than favorable light. A threat, a perfectly polished, legally packaged threat." Elijah rose slowly, his eyes burning. "I'm not afraid of you. Not yet," Silas murmured, a chilling prophecy. "But you will be, if you keep digging." Elijah didn't wait for another word. He snatched the folder, its contents a burning ember in his hand, and strode out, forcing himself not to run, not to look like he was fleeing. Outside, he gulped down the cold, unforgiving air, his chest heaving. He'd expected resistance, but not the chilling confidence, the absolute certainty with which Silas Thorne dismissed his father's suffering. This wasn't just legal maneuvering. It was a declaration of ownership. These people believed they owned the narrative, they owned the truth, and they believed they owned him. His phone buzzed again, a venomous notification from the digital world. Against his better judgment, he opened it. A new video had surfaced, expertly edited footage from the proposal. Twisted, contorted to paint him as aggressive, unhinged. The comments were a torrent of digital venom. Dude needs therapy, not a wife. No wonder she said no. He looks dangerous. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from a cold, dawning rage. This wasn't random internet cruelty. This was deliberate, coordinated, a calculated attack. He switched off his phone, plunging into silence, and kept walking, unsure of where to turn, until his feet, guided by an unseen force, led him somewhere quieter, somewhere rooted in history, the community archives and voice of Willow Creek, where his father's scandal had first been weaponized. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged paper and forgotten ink. Elijah asked to speak with anyone who remembered the truth. After a quiet search, they led him to a cluttered back room where an elder, Aunt Clara May, sat, hunched over a desk piled high with forgotten stories. She looked up. Her eyes, though tired, held a spark of knowing. "You're Elijah Vance, aren't you?" "Yes," he whispered, the weight of his quest heavy in his voice. "I'm trying to understand what really happened to my father." Aunt Clara May gestured to a worn chair. "Your father's story, it never sat right with me. But back then, the Thornes had their hooks deep in everything. They had connections. Stories disappeared. Witnesses went silent." Her voice dropped. "Was there any real proof of what they accused him of?" Elijah pressed, his hope a fragile flame. "Not concrete proof," Aunt Clara May admitted, her gaze distant. "Just allegations, whispers, financial inconsistencies that appeared out of nowhere, double quotes, documents that contradicted themselves. It all felt manufactured." The room tilted, a cold, hard confirmation of his deepest fears. Anya continued, her voice a low, steady current. "I reached out to the Sterlings once for comment. Eleanor Sterling herself sent a cease and desist. Within hours, the digital silence was deafening. No one dared question their narrative. Elias felt a bitter, hollow laugh rise in his throat. "They're trying to do the same to me." "Oh, I know," Anya said, turning her monitor, the screen a cruel mirror. "You've been trending all morning." Elias's stomach plummeted. Exaggerated posts, fabricated comments, a narrative twisting him from a grieving son into an unpredictable threat. It was happening again, the same insidious playbook they used on his father. He left Anya's office, her words echoing like a somber bell. "People like the Sterlings don't just erase one family and stop. They repeat patterns. They devour." As he stepped onto the rain-slicked street, his phone buzzed. A new email, no name, no subject, just 4 words. "You're not imagining it." Attached, a location and a time. A hidden cafe downtown. Tonight. Elias stared at the screen, the wind whipping around him. He knew. Walking into this meeting could change everything, but so could ignoring it. He closed his eyes briefly, his father's voice a phantom whisper. "Guard our legacy, son." He opened them, decision forged in steel. He was going. The cafe, the foundry, was tucked between a boarded-up bookstore and a laundromat whose neon sign flickered like a dying heartbeat. The kind of place no one would think twice about. A perfect shadow in plain sight. Elias arrived 10 minutes early, the evening chill gnawing at his resolve. He scanned the street, every shadow a potential watcher. Paranoia, a constant companion now. He stepped inside. The warm aroma of dark roast coffee wrapped around him, a stark contrast to the icy dread in his gut. A few patrons were scattered, to students hunched over glowing laptops, an elderly couple sharing a quiet moment, a man reading a worn paperback, with an intensity that suggested he wasn't reading at all. Elias's eyes locked onto him. Mid-40s, trim beard, eyes that held the weight of untold battles. He looked up the moment Elias sat down. "You're Elias Vance," the man said quietly, sliding a cup of black coffee across the table. Marcus Thorne. The name didn't ring a bell, but the gravitas in his voice did. "You emailed me?" Elias asked, his tone guarded. "Yeah," Marcus replied. "And before you ask, no, I'm not here to scam you, hurt you, or drag you deeper into the spotlight you never wanted. I'm here because I know what the Sterlings did to your father, and I know what they're trying to do to you. Elias's pulse hammered. Who are you? Former project analyst for Sterling Conglomerate. Marcus said. Fired 6 years ago. Why? Elias asked. Marcus let out a humorless, brittle laugh. Let's just say I didn't clap when they expected me to. I asked questions. He reached into his worn messenger bag, pulling out a stack of papers, neatly clipped. Elias stared at them, a gasp caught in his throat. I wasn't supposed to keep these, Marcus said, but when you've been in that world long enough, you learn to protect yourself. The top sheet was a blueprint. Elias recognized parts of it instantly. The area where his father's shop once stood, a monument to a fading dream. What is this? Elias whispered. Evidence, Marcus said, and your inheritance. Elias frowned. Inheritance. Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Your father's property sits on land that was projected to become the crown jewel of the Sterling dynasty's expansion. Their entire future portfolio depends on acquiring that block. Without it, they lose billions. Investors pull out. Empires crumble. Elias swallowed hard. But they already own most of the area. Most, Marcus corrected, tapping the blueprint. Not all. Your father refused to sell. And the moment he refused, everything in his life shifted. Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine, a premonition of dread. They destroyed him, Marcus continued, his voice laced with a quiet fury. Through manufactured scandals, financial sabotage, whisper campaigns, anything to paint him unstable, irresponsible. It didn't matter if the accusations were true. They only needed the rumor to stick. That's exactly what they're doing to me, Elias murmured, his throat tightening. Of course they are, Marcus said. Because you're the last obstacle. When your father died, you inherited the rights to that land. Rights that Sterling Conglomerate needs desperately. Elias exhaled slowly. And Serafina? Marcus looked pained for a moment. Serafina's a complicated case. I don't think she wanted to be part of this, but Eleanor. She handles her children the same way she handles mergers, with intimidation disguised as ambition. Elias's jaw clenched. Part of him wanted to defend Serafina. Another part wanted to erase her from his memory entirely. You're telling me, he said, his voice raw, that the woman I loved was pushed into dating me, just so her family could get access to my father's land? Marcus didn't answer immediately. That silence spoke more than words ever could. Look, Marcus finally said, I don't know how much Serafina knew, but I do know Eleanor, and nothing she does is accidental. She doesn't tolerate loose ends. She doesn't tolerate resistance. And she sure as hell doesn't tolerate a low-income heir who won't sign what she wants him to sign. Elias stared at the table, the cracks in the wood blurring as emotions swelled inside him. Rage, disgust, heartbreak, betrayal. Marcus continued, his voice softer now. I was fired after. I questioned why we were targeting community anchors already marked for redevelopment. Malik's voice was a low rumble. The beacon, your family's cultural center, was one of them. The historical impact reports were dismissed. Community board pleas ignored. But Serafina Thorne wanted it anyway. And when Serafina Thorne wants something, there are only two outcomes: absolute compliance or utter destruction. Elijah ran his hands through his hair, a tremor in his voice. Why tell me this now? Malik hesitated. Because I saw the revitalization video. The way they paraded your family's legacy as blight. The way they humiliated you. And when your name started trending, I knew exactly what was happening. You knew, Elijah whispered, the words heavy with dawning realization. Because they did it before. To me, Malik replied, his gaze steady. To your grandfather. And to 3 other pillars of our community before that. Elijah slumped back, stunned. Why hasn't anyone stopped them? Malik shook his head, a deep sorrow in his eyes. People tried. A few sued. All lost. The Thorns buried them under mountains of legal fees and vicious public smear campaigns. One elder lost their home. Another lost their life's work. Another lost their very spirit. The small cafe, the gathering place, felt suddenly suffocating. The air grew heavy with unspoken histories. Malik leaned in, his voice dropping. But you, Elijah, you're the first one they targeted through a relationship. That's new. That tells me they're desperate, if you're going to fight them. You need to understand just how far they will go to erase us." Elijah wasn't sure he wanted to hear the rest, but he knew he had to. Malak pulled out a second stack of documents, encrypted emails, time-stamped memos, internal directives stamped confidential. "You're being watched, Elijah," Malak said. "Not directly, but your online activity, your public movements. They want to know if you plan to fight back." Elijah felt a cold knot twist in his gut. "And if I do, they'll ruin you," Malak answered bluntly. "The same way they tried to ruin your grandfather, only faster. Social media makes their job easier now." Elijah closed his eyes briefly, picturing the hateful comments from earlier, the ones calling him radical, unstable, a relic of the past. They weren't random trolls, they were planted seeds of doubt, designed to divide. He opened his eyes again. "What do you want from me?" Malak shook his head. "This isn't about what I want, it's about what you deserve. You deserve the truth, and you deserve a chance to defend what's yours, what's ours." He slid a final, aged document across the table. Elijah hesitated before picking it up. It was a legacy protection clause, a hidden addendum to the original urban renewal contract. The language was dense, but one line screamed out: "Ownership reverts to the original community trust representatives. If acquisition occurred under coercion, fraudulent inducement, or failure to uphold community benefit." Elijah's heartbeat accelerated. This means they could lose everything," Malak nodded. "If this clause becomes public, if you can prove their systemic coercion, their empire collapses. But Serafina knows that. She buried this page decades ago. If she finds out you have it, she'll come after you." Elijah finished. "Worse," Malak said quietly. "She'll come after your reputation first, then your livelihood, then whatever you love most, whatever gives you strength." Elijah absorbed that in silence, fingers tightening around the document, a fire igniting within him. The cafe door chimed as someone walked in. Malak immediately stiffened, his eyes flicking toward the entrance. A sleek, black-armored SUV idled outside the window, tinted windows like obsidian, no plates visible. "Elijah," Malak whispered, his voice urgent. "Listen carefully, leave separately from me. Don't go straight home, don't go anywhere predictable. And keep that clause hidden, like a sacred trust." Elijah nodded, adrenaline spiking. Malak stood. "This isn't just about your grandfather anymore. It's about stopping a cycle of erasure, about reclaiming our narrative." Elijah rose slowly, his posture straightening. "What happens now?" Malak looked at him with a mix of hope and solemn warning. "Now, you decide whether you're willing to fight a dynasty that has already decided your fate, and the fate of our people." Elijah didn't know if he was ready, but he knew he couldn't walk away, not now. Not after everything they'd taken, everything they threatened to erase. He left the gathering place through the back exit, heart pounding, and slipped into the alley. The SUV remained parked out front, engine humming like a predator waiting to lunge. He didn't know who was inside, but he knew one thing: the Thornes were already watching. And the war his grandfather couldn't finish, the fight for their community's soul, had just begun. The next 48 hours unfolded in a haze, one where Elijah could feel the ground shifting under him, but he hadn't yet seen the direction in which it tilted. The warnings Malak gave him clung to his thoughts like a shroud. Every shadow on the street felt like a spy, every glance from a stranger. Like a test, he walked faster, kept his head down, avoided patterns, avoided home until exhaustion drove him back. But even then, he didn't sleep, because Celeste Thorne was everywhere. Her name, her face, her perfect, curated image, it plastered every social feed, every trending sidebar, every gossip account. Hungry for a new narrative to tear apart, Elijah had already been publicly shamed at the revitalization proposal. That alone would have trended for a week. But the new headline sent the internet into a frenzy. Thorne heiress Celeste engaged to tech titan Sterling Vance, a man whose wealth dwarfed entire nations, a man carved from generations of privilege, a man who symbolized exactly what Serafina Thorne wanted in her family's orbit, and above all, a man Elijah had never met, but suddenly felt like the final nail in a coffin. Buried long ago, the worst part wasn't the news, it wasn't the photographs, though they were painful enough. Celeste, in his ancestral kente cloth, only days ago, now wrapped in Sterling's bespoke embrace. The lighting was soft, their smiles perfectly rehearsed, their bodies angled in ways that signaled a cold, calculated familiarity. No. What crushed Elijah was the caption. A partnership built on trust, vision, and shared future goals. The message was subtle, but unmistakable. Celeste's future was with someone of her status, someone worthy, someone who understood power, someone not him, before he could process the betrayal. The digital world, a relentless echo chamber, replayed the moment. Castian Blackwood, heir to a dynasty built on broken promises, slipping a diamond onto Seraphina Vance's finger, a stone so vast it mocked the very foundation of Elias's ancestral home, now threatened by their greed. She smiled, a porcelain mask of composure, as if she had never known the quiet strength of Elias's world. He wanted to tear his gaze away, to unsee the betrayal. But the internet, a cruel, endless loop, ensured he couldn't. He retreated into the solitude of his apartment, hours blurring into an indistinguishable haze. He scrolled until his vision, like his spirit, blurred. His heart didn't break cleanly. It shattered, a slow-motion implosion, each fragment a memory, a promise, a dream. Every notification felt like a fresh wound, someone twisting the shards deeper. Finally, with a guttural cry, he forced himself to stop. He hurled the phone across the room, as if it were a venomous serpent. Perhaps it was. Perhaps this entire orchestrated spectacle was designed to poison him, to weaken his spirit before he could even begin to fight. But he was no longer that boy, not the pawn matriarch Isolde Blackwood expected him to be, not the naive soul he had unknowingly played. He reached for Professor Heiress's worn leather satchel, pulling out the dossiers, the faded maps, the suppressed reports. Each document, a testament to generations of struggle, a blueprint of the Blackwoods' systematic erosion of his people's heritage. Every page strengthened his resolve, every line. Every concealed addendum whispered the same sacred truth. His father had been right. Elias had inherited more than land. He had inherited a war. If the Blackwoods expected him to crumble under the emotional blow of Seraphina's engagement, they gravely underestimated him. Because heartbreak, for Elias, was not an ending. It was the forge, the crucible where sorrow transmuted into an unyielding fire, igniting a resolve that would burn brighter than any diamond. He arrived at the Blackwood Legacy Gala uninvited, the very thought twisting his gut. But Professor Reese had insisted. It was their best chance to gather intelligence, to observe the chilling dynamic between Seraphina, Matriarch Isolde, and Castian in public. To confirm the chilling theory Professor Reese had quietly suggested, Castian wasn't just Seraphina's fiancé. He was the financial lifeline for the Blackwoods' failing empire, propped up by stolen legacies. Elias walked into the opulent venue alone, dressed in the same stark black suit he wore the night his world imploded. Ironic, yes, but also a defiant symbol. The gala glittered like a scene from a dystopian film, a gilded cage for the elite. Towering glass ceilings, a symphony orchestra playing a hollow tune, servers gliding through the crowds with champagne flutes balanced on silver trays. People laughed too loudly, smiled too brightly, performing their wealth like a grotesque play. Eyes, sharp as daggers, darted his way. Whispers followed. That's him, the one from the video. Why is he here? But Elias kept moving. He didn't come to play their game. He came to expose it. He pretended to study the abstract artwork, drifting through the crowd, deliberately appearing unfazed by the stares. His heart hammered a war drum against his ribs, despite his calm exterior. Then he saw her, Seraphina, radiant, yet fragile, in a floor-length silver gown, her curls pinned loosely around her shoulders. In a style he once helped her perfect before their own quiet evenings. She was laughing at something Castian said, laughing too loudly. The way people laugh when they know cameras are near. Her smile was perfect, her posture flawless, her eyes empty. It should have broken him. Instead, it clarified everything. She caught sight of him. The smile froze, her breath hitched. Her hand dropped from Castian's arm. For a fleeting second, her facade slipped, and a wave of raw guilt, like a crack in polished marble, washed across her face. Then she looked away, quickly, deliberately, as if he were a shadow she desperately wished would vanish. Castian, noticing the subtle shift, followed her gaze. His jaw tightened, a possessive, predatory gesture. He didn't walk toward Elias, but his eyes, cold and calculating, never left him. Elias drifted deeper into the room, letting the orchestral music drown out the rising tension. He positioned himself near one of the towering pillars, watching, listening. The gala buzzed with chatter about the engagement, about Castian's recent financial maneuvers, about matriarch Isolde's rumored new project. He moved closer, careful not to draw attention, blending in with a group of oblivious donors pretending to admire a sculpture. The ancestral grove, Castian murmured to Isolde, his tone low, laced with contempt. Elias's breath caught, a cold knot tightening in his gut. He sidled slightly closer, feigning a sip of champagne. Isolde's voice, a silken whip, cut through the music. Not here. Not tonight. Not with him watching. He's here, Castian confirmed, a predatory glint in his eyes. Serafina saw him. Isolde stiffened, then let out a brittle, chilling laugh. Let him watch. Let him see the true cost of defiance. Let him witness what real power demands. Elias's grip on his glass threatened to shatter it. The final acquisition, Castian pressed. Are we proceeding? Or do we need to clean up more loose ends? Clean up. Elias's blood ran cold. Not just land, lives, legacies. Before Isolde could respond, a tray crashed somewhere behind them, drawing a momentary distraction. Elias stepped away before he was noticed, slipping into a side hallway. His breath came fast. His heart felt loud, a frantic drum in the silence. He leaned against the cool wall, absorbing the words that now carved themselves into his mind. A terrifying prophecy. Clean up. Castian knew about the ancestral grove. Both he and Isolde saw Elias not as a person, but as an obstacle, a problem to be eradicated. But something else tugged at Elias's awareness, a fleeting image he'd witnessed only minutes earlier. Serafina. He had seen fear in her eyes. Real fear. She wasn't as cold or indifferent as she tried to appear. Something inside her, too, was breaking. He walked deeper into the hallway, needing space to think, to breathe. A door clicked open nearby. He froze. Serafina stepped out of a powder room, wiping under her eyes, smudging mascara. She tried to hide it when she saw Elias. She flinched, not with revulsion, but with a raw, unguarded pain that ripped through her carefully constructed facade. A glimpse of the woman he once knew, trapped beneath layers of expectation and despair. A messy, human truth she was forbidden to show. For a long, agonizing moment, neither of them spoke. Her lips parted. Elias, what are you doing here? He stepped closer, but not too close. I could ask you the same question. You got engaged fast. She looked away, guilt tightening her expression. It's not what you think. No. Elias's voice cracked, not with heartbreak this time, but with a chilling realization. It's far worse, but with searing clarity. What is it? Because it feels like I'm part of something vast, something ancient and planned. Her eyes, usually guarded, shimmered with a nascent fear. I never wanted it to come to this. To what, Serafina? Elijah's voice was a low rumble. To this. To you humiliating me. In front of the entire city. Or to the way your family systematically dismantles mine. She flinched, as if his words were a physical blow, echoing generations of injustice. Elijah, please, not here. Not now. Why not? He demanded, his gaze unwavering. This is the gilded cage you chose, Serafina. Her breath hitched, a silent gasp. You don't understand. Then explain it, he urged. His voice a steel whisper. Serafina opened her mouth, a silent plea forming. But a voice, sharp as a whip, cut through the opulent hall. Serafina. Both of them stiffened. Cassandra Thorne swept into view, her expression a mask of polished ice. Her gaze, a predatory glint, sliced through Elijah before pinning her daughter. Back to the Founders' Gala, Serafina. Now, Cassandra's voice was a cold command. Both of you. Serafina hesitated. A flicker, barely perceptible, but Elijah saw it. A spark of rebellion. Cassandra saw it too. Cassandra's eyes narrowed to slits. Now, Serafina lowered her gaze, a silent surrender. and nodded, stepping away from Elijah. She walked past Elijah, the air between them thick with unspoken truths, with the practiced obedience of one raised under an iron fist. As Serafina finally disappeared down the gilded corridor, Cassandra turned back to Elijah. Her smile was slow, deliberate, controlled, deadly. "You should be careful where you lurk, Elijah. Not every hall in this city is meant for people like you." He met her gaze, unflinching. "You underestimated my father. You underestimate me, Cassandra." Her smile sharpened, a predator's grin. "No, Elijah, I never underestimate threats. I eliminate them." Her words struck him like a winter gale. The conversation was over. He left the Founders' Gala, carrying more than he'd arrived with. Confirmation of Serafina's fractured loyalty, undeniable proof of Cassandra's insidious schemes, and the chilling knowledge that Marcus Langford was woven deeper into the fabric of the urban renewal project than Elijah had ever imagined. This wasn't just a story of heartbreak anymore. It was a saga of stolen inheritance, of systemic injustice, and the brutal cost of truth. Elijah didn't sleep that night, not after the gala, not after the chilling confrontation with Cassandra, not after watching Serafina crumble, then reassemble herself into the perfect, unfeeling Thorne heiress right before his eyes. He'd gone home, locked the door, and paced his small living room until the first gray light of dawn. Every overheard word replayed in his mind, the whispered cleanup, Marcus's chillingly calm questions about acquisition, about relocation, Cassandra's venomous promise, "I eliminate them." The specters of injustice were no longer shadows in his past. They were standing right in front of him, teeth bared, but beneath all the rage and resolve, one moment haunted him most. The way Serafina looked at him before she walked away, not with hatred, but with a profound, aching regret, as if she were silently begging him to save her from the gilded prison she'd been born into, a cage she now seemed to willingly inhabit. He didn't know what to do with that. He didn't know if he even could care anymore. By noon the following day, he forced himself out of the apartment, the weight of his father's legacy pressing on him. Malik had asked him to stay alert, to gather information, to watch how the Thorne Empire moved. Elijah wasn't about to waste the advantage he'd stumbled upon. Their fear of him, subtle but visible, he had leverage now. He just didn't know how much. He headed to Malik's community hub, a vibrant, cluttered space near the old riverfront. When Elijah entered, Malik was already at his desk, surrounded by maps and historical documents, sorting through files like a general preparing for a long-fought war. "You look like hell," Malik muttered without looking up. "I met your friends last night," Elijah replied dryly. Malik glanced up sharply. "The Founders' Gala," Elijah nodded. "Cassandra, Marcus, and Serafina." Malik rubbed his temples, a weary sigh escaping him. "You shouldn't have gone alone, Elijah." "I wasn't alone," Elijah said, pulling out a small memory card from his phone and placing it on the worn wooden table. "My phone picked up part of their conversation. Not much, but enough." Malik's brows shot up. "You recorded something. It wasn't intentional," Elijah clarified. "The mic must have captured fragments while I was nearby." Malik plugged the card into his rugged laptop, eyes narrowing as he adjusted the audio levels. The recording was faint, voices muffled beneath the grand orchestral music and the clinking of champagne glasses. But a few phrases stood out, chillingly clear. "Thorne property acquisition. Must proceed." Loose ends. Malik froze, his face grim. "This is huge." "Elijah." "It's not enough for court," Elijah stated, knowing the legal hurdles. "No," Malik agreed, his voice low, "but it's enough to scare them, to shake their foundations." Elijah leaned against the desk, the wood cool against his back. "Cassandra cornered me afterward. Told me threats don't intimidate her." Malik let out a bitter, weary laugh. "Of course not. She's been doing this for 20 years, Elijah. Without consequence." 20 years, Elijah repeated, the number a heavy stone in his gut. "How many families, Malik? How many communities?" Malik hesitated, then answered quietly, "Too many to count, Elijah. Too many. Your father was the first to truly fight back. After they crushed him, others didn't dare." Anger flared hot and righteous in Elijah's chest. And Serafina, was she part of this too? Malik sighed, a deep, sorrowful sound. I told you. Elijah, Serafina is a pawn, raised to obey, groomed to be an extension of her mother's ruthless ambition. Elijah bristled. That doesn't excuse anything she did, Malik. No, Malik agreed, his gaze steady. But it explains why she looks like she's dying inside. Elijah, a soul trapped. Elijah didn't reply. He didn't want to feel sympathy. Sympathy complicated things. Sympathy made him vulnerable, and vulnerability was the one thing he couldn't afford right now. Malik shuffled through old, brittle documents, his brow furrowed, muttering under his breath, if Cassandra knows you have access to internal information, she'll move fast. She'll try to discredit you, maybe even push for legal action. She already started, Elijah said, his voice grim. The edited videos, the online comments, the insidious narrative that I'm unstable, a danger. Malik grimaced. That's her playbook, Elijah. Once a lie is loud enough, the truth becomes a whisper. Elijah exhaled, a shaky breath that solidified into resolve. Then we make our whisper a roar. Daniel's gaze sharpened, piercing Ethan's resolve. You're truly ready to fight, aren't you? Ethan's voice was a low growl. I have no other choice. They stripped my father of everything, shamed my family, and now they threaten to erase my future. I am done letting them win. Daniel studied him, a silent assessment, then a slow, deliberate nod. There's something you need to see. He placed a thin, unmarked envelope into Ethan's trembling hand. The Hart Real Estate logo, a gilded serpent, was instantly recognizable, but the documents inside made Ethan's stomach clench. Internal financial projections. Raw and desperate. This can't be right, Ethan whispered, his eyes scanning the damning figures. It makes no sense. Oh, it does, Daniel countered, a grim satisfaction in his tone. The Harts are drowning. They've overextended, leveraged everything on at least for failing projects. Investors are in a full-blown panic. Miranda's empire, built on sand and stolen dreams, is teetering on the brink. Ethan's hands tightened, crumpling the paper and the land. My father's land? The Cole property, Daniel confirmed, is their last lifeboat. They need to secure a massive development contract there. That would stabilize their entire house of cards. Ethan's voice dropped, a painful whisper. And Vanessa? She's part of the deal, Daniel revealed, his voice heavy. Marcus only agreed to invest if the marriage solidified their partnership. A merger of blood and capital. She didn't choose him, her mother did. A strange, bitter cocktail of pity and fury churned within Ethan. Vanessa had heard his pleas, but she was trapped too, a gilded bird, wings clipped, in a cage of her own making. He had no time for reflection. Daniel's phone buzzed, a jarring intrusion. He checked it, his face instantly draining of color, eyes widening in alarm. What is it? Ethan demanded, his heart leaping into his throat. Daniel spun the screen towards him. A live headline screamed, Ethan Cole spotted stalking Vanessa Hart at gala, security alert issued. Below it, a grainy, manipulated still frame from the gala hallway showed Ethan standing near Vanessa. The angle twisted to make him appear predatory, menacing, intentional. What the hell? Ethan breathed, a cold dread seeping into his bones. Daniel swore under his breath. They're trying to frame you, to paint you as unstable, dangerous. They're setting the stage for what? Ethan's voice was barely a whisper, but laced with steel. Daniel met his gaze, grim certainty etched on his face. For your destruction, public, legal, and personal. Ethan's pulse hammered, a frantic drumbeat against his ribs. We need to act first. Daniel nodded, a silent pact. Then we need more evidence, real evidence. Ethan swallowed hard, the taste of ash in his mouth. Where do we even start? Daniel hesitated, then spoke. I know someone who might have access to archived Hart files from years ago. Files Miranda thought she buried forever. But contacting them puts both of us at grave risk. I don't care, Ethan declared, his voice firm, unwavering. Tell me the name. Daniel opened his mouth. But a sudden, chilling knock on the apartment door made both men freeze. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, followed by an unnerving silence. Daniel's eyes widened in disbelief. Get in the bedroom. Now, Ethan didn't argue. He sprinted to the back room, pulling the door almost shut, leaving just enough of a crack to see. Daniel approached the front door, his hand hovering over the lock. "Who is it?" he called out, his voice strained. Silence. Then a fourth knock, quiet, deliberate. Daniel's shoulders stiffened, his jaw clenched. "I'm not opening this door." A woman's voice, smooth, controlled, and terrifyingly familiar, filtered through the wood. "Daniel, open the door. We need to talk." Ethan's breath hitched. "Miranda." Daniel mouthed a silent curse, backing away from the door slowly, his eyes darting to Ethan's hiding spot. "She can't know we're together. Stay hidden." Miranda's voice came again, calm as ice, cutting through the silence. "I know Ethan is in there." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Open the door, Daniel." Miranda commanded, "or I'll assume hostility." Daniel's voice cracked slightly, a desperate plea. "Miranda, you have no authority here." "Authority is a matter of perspective," she replied, her tone chillingly amused. The doorknob jiggled. She was trying to force it open. Daniel stood frozen, a deer caught in headlights. Ethan felt something sharp and primal ignite within him. Fear, yes, but also a searing, righteous anger. He wasn't running anymore. He stepped out of the bedroom, just as Miranda swung the door open, her eyes locking onto him. She stared at him, a cold, calculating gaze. He stared back, defiance burning in his eyes. "Ethan," she said, her voice a silken thread of menace, "we need to settle this quietly. You and I both know the alternative gets unpleasant." He stood straighter, every inch of him radiating defiance. "You don't get to threaten me anymore." Miranda, her smile sharpened, a predator's grin. "I'm not threatening. I'm promising." Daniel stepped between them, a shield. "Miranda, leave." She glanced at him, amusement flickering in her eyes, a cruel spark. "You were always so predictable, Daniel, loyal to a lost cause." "Get out," Daniel said, his voice firm, unwavering. Miranda's smile vanished, replaced by a chilling intensity. "You're making a mistake," she warned softly, her gaze sweeping over both of them. Then she turned, her heels echoing down the hallway like a countdown to an inevitable storm. When the door finally clicked shut, the silence was deafening. Ethan exhaled shakily, a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Daniel stared at him, his face pale. "She's accelerating her timeline." Ethan nodded, his jaw set. "Then so are we." He didn't realize his hands were still shaking until he looked down. Miranda had found him, threatened him, cornered him. This wasn't just war anymore. This was survival. The moment Miranda's footsteps faded down the hall, Daniel locked the door, slid the deadbolt across, and then braced both palms against it, as if expecting her to return with a battering ram. Ethan stood frozen in the center of the room, his heart pounding against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat. His pulse thundered in his ears. The air felt too thin, too sharp, suffocating. Miranda's presence had been like stepping into the shadow of something monstrous, something that didn't need to raise its voice to promise utter devastation. Daniel turned, his face pale, haunted. "She shouldn't have found you this fast. We underestimated how closely she's monitoring you." Ethan swallowed, forcing air into his burning lungs. "She said she knew I was here." "Which means she has eyes everywhere," Daniel muttered, his gaze sweeping the room, suspicion in every line of his face. Maybe digital tracking, maybe hired surveillance, maybe someone close to you is giving her updates. Ethan flinched, a cold wave washing over him. I barely talk to anyone. That's what worries me." Daniel replied, his voice grim. "It means she's watching your movements, not your relationships." A cold, heavy dread settled deep in Ethan's chest, a chilling premonition of the battle ahead. He was alone, yet never more exposed. The whispers had solidified into a roar. It wasn't paranoia. It was the chilling reality of a predator closing in. Elijah paced, his voice a low growl. "Victoria Sterling is escalating. She's afraid." "And that fear," Kai interjected, his gaze burning with a newfound resolve. "That's our leverage. But if we don't move now, she'll silence us before we even begin." Kai steadied himself, crossing to the worn table where their truth lay scattered. A mosaic of injustice, redevelopment documents, predatory clauses, hushed audio fragments. Financial projections that painted a grim picture of Sterling Holdings' drowning communities. Beneath their insatiable greed, every page was a weapon forged from the suffering of the unheard. She wants to destroy us, Kai stated, his voice barely a whisper. What's our next move, Elijah? Elijah stopped pacing, his eyes fixed on Kai. We need legal backup, someone who isn't bought, someone who isn't broken, someone who believes in justice, not just the highest bidder. Kai exhaled, the weight of countless rejections heavy on his mind. He pictured the dozens of high-powered lawyers who would slam their doors the moment Victoria Sterling's name was uttered. Do you know someone? Kai asked, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. Elijah hesitated, a pause that spoke volumes of the risk, the audacity of his next suggestion. There's one, a lawyer who once championed the voiceless, fought for consumer protection. Before she went private, brilliant, relentless, impossible to buy. Her name is Aisha Khan. Kai's breath hitched. Will she help us? She might. Elijah replied, a grim determination setting his jaw. If she sees what we have, but we must tread carefully. If Victoria senses we're building a legal case, she'll strike first. And when she strikes, Kai finished, his voice hard, it'll be public, devastating, and irreversible. Elijah nodded slowly. Then we don't give her the chance. They arrived at Aisha Khan's office in the late afternoon. A beacon of defiance. A modest glass-front law office nestled between a community clinic and a local bookstore. A stark contrast to the towering citadels of power. This place didn't reek of money. It hummed with the scent of late-night coffee, stacks of legal briefs, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. Inside, the lobby was small, but radiated a quiet strength. A receptionist with kind, knowing eyes greeted them. Do you have an appointment? No, Elijah said, his voice firm. But she'll want to see this. He handed over a sealed envelope, a summary of their findings, a testament to systemic injustice. The receptionist scanned the label, her eyebrows lifting slightly in recognition of Elijah's name. A name whispered with reverence in these circles. She disappeared behind a partition. Minutes later, she returned. Ms. Khan will see you. Kai felt a shift, like a heavy door creaking open inside him, letting in the smallest, most precious flicker of hope. Aisha Khan sat behind a desk, a fortress of case files, sticky notes, and half-empty coffee mugs. She was in her late 30s, with eyes that held the wisdom of battles fought and won, and an expression that tolerated no pretense. She rose as they entered, a formidable presence. Elijah Vance, she said, her voice a low, resonant hum. I thought you were done sticking your neck out for lost causes. Elijah offered a tight, defiant smile. This one isn't lost, Aisha. Not yet. Aisha turned her piercing gaze to Kai, studying him with an intensity that saw straight through to his soul. You're Kai Jenkins. It wasn't a question, but an acknowledgement of his struggle. Yes, Kai affirmed, his voice steadier than he felt, fueled by the weight of his community's trust. Aisha gestured for them to sit. I've seen the headlines, the curated videos, the narrative Victoria Sterling is crafting around you. She tapped the envelope on her desk. But that doesn't interest me. This does. Start talking. Elijah recounted everything. From his father's unjust downfall, the humiliation, the manipulation, the whispered threats. Kai added his own testimony. The chilling conversation between Julian and Victoria Sterling at the gala. The cold calculation in their eyes. Aisha listened with a stillness that felt almost surgical, her mind dissecting their words, searching for the raw, undeniable truth. When they finished, she leaned back, silent for several long, agonizing seconds. Finally, she spoke. You have enough to open a case. Kai's breath caught, a surge of adrenaline, but she continued, her voice unwavering. You need more to survive it. Elijah frowned. More? How? Aisha opened a desk drawer, pulling out a stack of legal tomes and a fresh notepad. Families like the Sterlings build their defenses for generations. They weave a web of influence, years before anyone dares to challenge them. They have connections everywhere, judges, journalists, politicians. They can stall, bury, twist, or poison any attempt to expose them. Kai felt the fragile hope within him shrink. So we're outmatched. Aisha shook her head. a glint in her eye. Not outmatched, outnumbered. Yes, but numbers don't win cases, evidence does. And public opinion, she added, her gaze sweeping between them, secures them. Kai leaned forward, his voice urgent. What do we need? 3 things, Aisha declared, holding up 3 fingers. 1. A meticulously documented paper trail, linking Victoria Sterling directly to fraudulent acquisition strategies. 2. Irrefutable proof that your father's downfall involved coercion, tampering, or outright sabotage. And 3, she continued, her eyes locking onto Kai, evidence that Lena or Julian Sterling participated knowingly. Kai stiffened. The mention of Lena, a punch to the gut. Aisha watched him closely. If she knew her mother was using you, even partially, it strengthens your claim. It shows the systemic nature of their corruption. Kai clenched his fists, his voice raw. I don't want to destroy her. Aisha's expression didn't soften. It hardened, reflecting the brutal reality of their fight. Kai, if you pull your punches, Victoria Sterling will not hesitate. Understand this. Anyone aligned with her, voluntarily or through fear, will be treated as an extension of her power. This isn't personal, Kai. This is survival. This is justice for your people. Kai nodded slowly, the harsh truth sinking like stones inside him. How do we get the evidence? Aisha began listing steps, each more daunting than the last, yet delivered with unwavering conviction. First, she said, we legally request access to archived Sterling real estate records. They'll reject it, of course, but that's the point. It establishes that you're playing above board, while they hide. Second, you file a preliminary injunction to halt development on your ancestral land. This forces a review of all property documentation, exposing their illicit dealings. And third, she continued, her voice dropping to a strategic whisper, you quietly gather more from the inside. Emails, memos, contracts, anything that proves coercion, manipulation, or outright fraud. Elijah glanced at Kai, a silent understanding passing between them. Kai's jaw tightened, a fire igniting in his eyes. The fight had truly begun. He knew exactly what Aisha was implying. You're talking about Serena, he murmured. The name wound. Aisha's gaze was unwavering. She's the only one who can dismantle their narrative, Eli. The only one whose conscience might still be alive. Eli looked down, his emotions a tempest, torn between the ache of betrayal and the lingering memory of the woman who once saw a future with him. Even if she helps, Ellie's voice was a whisper. It won't erase the damage they've done to our community. No, Aisha affirmed, but it might stop the complete erasure of your voice, of our truth. Eli swallowed, a dry rasp in his throat. What is coming next? Aisha slid a printed screenshot across the worn table. It was a draft news article, chillingly precise. Time-stamped, but not yet published. Elijah Vance, agitator or criminal. Below it, fabricated quotes twisted his words. Manipulated photos showed him in compromising situations, and anonymous sources painted him as a dangerous radical. Eli stared, the words blurring into a suffocating darkness. They're preparing to silence you, Eli. Aisha's voice was a steel thread. Professionally, socially, legally, they want to bury the truth with you. Aisha leaned forward, her eyes burning with a quiet fire. If you want to survive this, if you want justice for what they've done, you fight now. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now, something ignited within Eli, not rage, not revenge, but a searing clarity, a purpose. He rose slowly, the weariness falling away. What do I do first? Aisha pushed a dog-eared business card towards him. You go home, you lie low, you give me permission to file the injunction. She paused, a beat of heavy silence. And then, you reach out to Serena. Whether you hate her or not, she holds pieces of the truth. We need to expose them. Ellie's hand closed around the card, the edges digging into his palm. He didn't want to speak to Serena, didn't want to revisit the pain. But the fight for his community, for justice, burned brighter than any personal wound. I'll talk to her, he said, his voice firm. Aisha nodded, a flicker of grim satisfaction in her eyes. Good. Then we're in motion. Eli walked out of her office, the weight of the world still on his shoulders, but now it felt like the weight of a shield, not chains. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was fighting, and the Thorne dynasty had no idea. what was truly coming. Eli barely remembered the walk back to his apartment. The city lights blurred into streaks of defiance. Aisha's words echoed, a mantra against the encroaching darkness, stamped onto his very soul. They're preparing to bury you. Fight now. Reach out to Serena. Serena, her name alone, was a complex chord of anger, longing, and the ghost of a shared dream. He mourned the ally he thought she was, the future they might have built, the genuine connection he once believed in. But Aisha was right. Serena held answers that could free his community, even if getting them tore him apart. He pushed open his apartment door, and a cold wave washed over him. Wrongness, a silent invasion. He stepped cautiously inside, scanning the room. Everything seemed untouched, yet his gut screamed danger. Then he saw it. A single, stark white envelope on his worn coffee table. No stamp, no address. Just a chilling presence, placed perfectly at the center. Someone had been here. A cold shiver cracked down his spine. He approached slowly and opened it. Inside, printed text, "You should have walked away, Eli. Some truths are better left buried." Eli crumpled the note, his hands shaking with a controlled fury. The Thorne dynasty wasn't bluffing. Their reach was everywhere. Every move he made was being monitored. But fear was their weapon, and he refused to wield it for them. He sank onto the couch, pulling out Aisha's business card, its sharp edges a reminder of the fight. He needed to contact Serena. But how, if the Thornes were watching him? They'd be watching their own daughter even more closely. Before he could think it through, his phone buzzed. At first, he ignored it, expecting more hate, more manufactured outrage, more edits of the gala hallway clip, making him look like a stalker. But the buzz persisted, longer this time. With a sigh, he picked it up. Unknown number, a message. "We need to talk. Alone." His heart hammered. Serena. He didn't respond immediately. He didn't trust the timing. He didn't trust the number. He didn't trust her. A second message came. "This isn't a trap, Eli. I swear it. I need to tell you something before they silence me too." Silence me too. The words pierced him. He typed back, "Where?" Seconds later, Old Community Center, midnight. "Come alone. I will too." Midnight. A deserted, forgotten place. Exactly the kind of meeting that could end with him disappearing. Another cautionary tale. But he had no choice. The truth was too important. He didn't have to wait until midnight for his nightmare to escalate. At 5:17 p.m., 3 thunderous knocks rattled his apartment door. Not the subtle menace of the Thornes, but the blunt force of authority. Eli froze. "City police, open up." His blood ran cold. He walked towards the door, a daze settling over him, and opened it. 2 officers, grim-faced, hands near their holsters. "Elijah Vance," one demanded. "Yes." "Elias Vance, you're under arrest. Theft of corporate property. You have the right to remain silent." The words hit Elias like a physical blow. Before he could process, cold steel clamped around his wrists, the click echoing in the sudden silence. "You can explain at the precinct," the officer sneered. Every shadow in the hallway seemed to hold a peering eye, every whisper a judgment. As Elias was paraded through his own home, a spectacle of shame, a searing heat of humiliation, a fire he knew too well, consumed him. It was the same inferno that had raged the night his world publicly imploded. Again, the glint of phone cameras. Again, the hushed, venomous whispers. His life, once a beacon of promise, now a public crucifixion, broadcast for all to consume. Invisible hands, pulling strings in the shadows. Inside the squad car, Elias sat, numb. They planted it. Serafina, she planted it all. Mac had warned him. Lena had warned him. But nothing could prepare him for the brutal, swift snap of the trap. At the precinct, the nightmare deepened. Detective Harding, a man carved from stone, laid out the evidence, items allegedly found in Elias's storage locker. High-end tech, specialized tools, objects Elias had never laid eyes on. "Your former colleagues reported suspicious activity," Harding stated, his voice devoid of empathy. "They said you were unstable." Harding leaned back, a predator toying with its prey. "Angry after the breakup. One even claims they saw you near that storage unit multiple times." Elias's gaze burned. That's a lie. Harding merely shrugged. Prove it. You were fired months ago. Apparently, you kept a spare key, Harding countered, a smirk playing on his lips. I didn't. Elias roared. Then someone got it from you, didn't they? The room spun. You don't believe me, Elias whispered, his voice raw. Harding's smile was a sliver of ice. Right now, Mr. Vance, I believe the evidence. Elias's fists clenched, knuckles white. Evidence that was planted. Harding raised an eyebrow, a flicker of mock curiosity. By whom, Mr. Vance? The name, Serafina, hung unspoken, a venomous challenge in the stale air. Elias's throat tightened. That's what I thought, Harding concluded, pushing the file away. Listen, Vance, Harding's voice dropped, a veiled threat. You're in over your head, and if I were you, I'd think very carefully before making accusations that sound like conspiracies. Elias's chest burned with a righteous fury. This isn't a conspiracy, Elias thundered. It's corruption. They've done this before. But Harding was already standing. We're done. Hours later, Lena arrived, a hurricane of controlled rage. Exhausted but incandescent, she slammed her briefcase onto the table. This is absolute garbage. Detective, she declared, her voice cutting through the precinct's din. None of this will hold in court. The evidence chain is sloppy, the report's inconsistent, and your witness statements contradict each other. Your setup is showing, Detective. Harding's face darkened. We have enough to hold him overnight. No, Lena snapped, her eyes blazing. Because I'm filing a motion for immediate release. And if you continue this charade, I will subpoena every single officer involved. Every single one. Within the hour, Elias walked out, released on bail. The night air of Liberty City was sharp, biting, but tasted of a fragile freedom. Lena's face was a storm of contained fury. You need to understand something, Elias, she said, her voice low and intense. That arrest, that wasn't just intimidation. That was Serafina testing how fast she could break you. Elias exhaled a ragged breath. She planted everything. I know, Lena affirmed, her gaze unwavering. The question now is, can we use her desperation against her? She showed her hand to Early. Mac met them at the curb, his face etched with concern. You okay? Elias shook his head, a silent no. But I'm still here, he managed. That's enough for now, Mac said, a hand on his shoulder. But we have to stay ahead. She will escalate. Elias clutched his phone. Midnight loomed. I have a meeting, Elias said. Mac frowned, with who Elias hesitated. Celeste, Mac's face tightened. Be careful, Elias. She's dangerous. No, Lena corrected, her eyes sharp. She's trapped, and people who are trapped can either become unexpected allies or even more dangerous threats. Elias glanced at his watch. 11:30 p.m. He started walking. Freedom Square, a vast expanse of asphalt, stretched out beneath the flickering, dying glow of streetlights. It felt like an abandoned stage set for a forgotten play. Wednesday nights were always quiet, but tonight, an eerie, suffocating silence pressed down, as if Liberty City itself held its breath. Elias moved towards the furthest reaches of the lot, where shadows deepened into inky pools between monolithic concrete pillars. Celeste stood waiting, a lone, fragile figure swallowed by a long, dark coat, her hair a loose, disheveled twist. Nothing like the dazzling woman from The Proposal, or the confident fiancé smiling in Victor Sterling's arms. This was a ghost. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands trembling. You came, she whispered. Elias's voice was a shard of ice. Why did you tell the press I stalked you? She flinched, recoiling as if struck. I didn't. Then who did? My mother, Celeste choked out. Her voice broke, a fragile confession. She controls everything, my phone, my accounts, my calendar. Even Victor. She wants you gone, Elias. She wants you destroyed. Elias stared, a cold dread settling in his gut. Anger, sharp and cold, pierced through him. You helped her. Tears welled in Celeste's eyes, spilling down her cheeks, not willingly. She said she'd ruin me if I didn't reject you publicly, she said. And I know you'll hate me for this. Humiliating you would make you back off from the land. The words were a blade twisting in Elias's gut. And you chose her over me? Celeste covered her mouth, shaking uncontrollably. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted any of this. I didn't know she would frame you, or fire those shots at your reputation. I didn't know she'd go this far." "You knew enough," Elias whispered, his voice raw. "I came because," Celeste's voice cracked, "because I have proof. Proof she destroyed your father. Proof she's planning to do the same to you." Elias's breath hitched in his throat. "What proof?" Celeste's trembling fingers fumbled inside her coat. A small, silver flash drive. Elias froze. "This has my mother's emails," Celeste whispered, her voice barely audible. "Memos. Internal directives. Recordings from meetings. Things she never meant for anyone to see." Her voice broke. "I copied them. I'm going to run away after this. Victor will cut me off. My mother will disown me. But you deserve the truth." Elijah clutched the data chip, its fragile plastic holding the weight of generations. A truth that could shatter the gilded cage of the consortium. Lena stepped closer, her voice a raw whisper. "Elijah, I loved you. I still do. But I was never truly free to choose. My life was a gilded cage." He met her eyes, and for the first time, he didn't see the woman who had seemingly betrayed him. He saw the woman forged by a system designed to control. He saw the struggle, the silent defiance within her, and a profound understanding replaced his pain. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely audible. Lena swallowed hard, her eyes wide with urgency. "Be careful. The overseer will know soon." And as she spoke, a guttural roar tore through the industrial night, an engine revving, headlights like predatory eyes searing across the crumbling asphalt. A black armored vehicle, the consortium's enforcers, sped towards them. "They found us. Run, Elijah." Lena screamed, and the world exploded into chaotic motion. The armored vehicle barreled forward, its reinforced grille a monstrous maw, headlights cutting through the gloom like a hunter's gaze, locking onto its prey. For a split second, Elijah froze. It wasn't fear, but a chilling disbelief. Disbelief that the consortium would unleash such overt force, here, now. But then Lena shoved him with a strength born of desperation. "Move, Elijah, move," she cried, her voice a desperate plea for freedom. Her shout snapped him back. He grabbed her hand, their fingers intertwining, and sprinted towards the skeletal remains of an old factory. The vehicle's tires shrieked, a metallic scream, as the driver swerved, trying to cut them off. Gravel and shattered glass sprayed under their frantic feet. The air thrummed with danger. They dove behind a massive, rusted support beam just as the vehicle slammed into it. The impact sent a brutal shudder through the ancient metal structure. Lena stifled a cry. Her hand clamped over her mouth. Elijah gripped her shoulders, his eyes burning with resolve. "We have to go, now," she nodded, breath ragged, terror stark in her eyes. This wasn't the polite fear of social consequence. This was raw, primal terror. The fear of being silenced, of losing everything. The engine roared again, a hungry beast. "They're not giving up," Lena whispered, her voice cracking. "They sent them to silence the truth." Elijah squeezed her hand, pulling her deeper into the labyrinth of decaying machinery and fractured beams of moonlight. They moved as fast as their panic-driven legs could carry them. Behind, the vehicle reversed with a violent jolt, beginning its slow, predatory maneuver through the ruins. "They're trying to corner us," Elijah gasped, the old service shaft. They sprinted towards the far corner, where a heavy, rusted door, the entrance to a forgotten service shaft, glowed faintly under a flickering, dying fluorescent light. Elijah yanked the handle. It resisted, groaning like a wounded beast, then gave way with a deafening metallic shriek. Inside, the shaft was a black void, cold, smelling of damp concrete and forgotten dreams. The door slammed shut behind them, muffling the world's chaos. Their footsteps echoed, a frantic rhythm, as they descended rapidly, floor after floor, the concrete vibrating under each hurried stump. Halfway down, Lena gasped, clutching the grimy railing. I can't breathe. Just a second." Elijah turned. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the chill. She looked fragile, on the verge of collapse, but then heavy. Deliberate footsteps above them froze him. They weren't alone. Someone was coming down. A single set of steps, slow, methodical, chilling. Elijah's pulse spiked. They're inside. He whispered, "We have to keep moving." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Come on, Lena. You can do this." She nodded through her panic, forcing herself upright. They hurried to the lower levels. But when they reached the exit door to the ground floor, Elijah stopped cold. A shadow, tall and menacing, stood on the other side, waiting. He instinctively pulled Lena back. Pressing her against the cold wall, she clutched his shirt, trembling. His mind raced. 2 enforcers. One above, one below. They were boxed in. "What do we do?" Lena whispered, her voice barely a breath. Elijah's eyes darted around the shaft. No fire escape, no second exit. Nothing but concrete walls and danger closing in. Unless, he peered over the railing below them. The space between stair flights extended into the forgotten sub-basement. A drop, a dangerous one, but survivable if they landed right. He pulled Lena close. "Do you trust me?" he asked. She blinked, startled by the question, but her eyes held his. Yes, he didn't hesitate. "We jump." Her eyes widened in terror. "Elijah." The steps above grew louder, closer. The door below rattled, a chilling promise. No more time. He held her tightly. On 3. 1, 2. They jumped. The world tilted violently as they plunged into the dark abyss. Elijah twisted midair, angling his body beneath hers. The landing was brutal, concrete meeting spine, but he cushioned most of her fall. Pain exploded through his back, a searing fire. But he bit it down. Lena groaned, shaken but conscious. Are you okay?" "No." Elijah gasped, pushing himself up. "But we have to move." They scrambled to their feet, forcing their way into the sub-basement corridor. It was lit by a single, buzzing bulb, casting more shadows than light. Rusted pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping occasionally into shallow, stagnant puddles on the floor. Behind them, the enforcers' footsteps resumed, faster now. They had followed the plunge. Lena's breath came in ragged sobs. "They're going to kill us. Not if we get out first," Elijah said, his eyes scanning. He spotted an old maintenance door. At the end of the corridor, there, they ran toward it, shoes slapping through water. Elijah shoved the door open and found a narrow service tunnel, barely lit. Lena hesitated. "This looks dangerous." "It's more dangerous behind us," he said, pushing her gently forward. "Go," she obeyed. The tunnel sloped upward. At the end, moonlight spilled through a metal grate. Elijah climbed first, pushing the grate aside with a grunt of effort. It clattered onto the pavement above, exposing them to the fresh, cold night air. Kai hauled Lena over the crumbling concrete barrier, their breath ragged, muscles screaming. They stumbled into a forgotten alley, the city's hum a distant, mocking lullaby. Kai scanned the shadows behind them. No pursuit. Not yet. They ran again, a desperate, silent prayer with every stride, until they reached the skeletal remains of an old factory loading dock. Kai stopped, chest heaving, the air burning in his lungs. Lena's knees buckled. She slid down the grimy wall, burying her face in her hands. Raw sobs tearing through her. Panic, grief, and a profound sense of betrayal choked every gasp. "They want me gone," she choked out, her voice a fragile whisper. "My own mother. She wants me erased." Kai knelt before her, the adrenaline that had fueled their escape now draining into a trembling exhaustion. "She wants silence, Lena, not necessarily death," he said, his voice raspy. "But she's willing to burn everything to keep her empire intact." Lena lifted her tear-streaked face, eyes hollow. "I didn't mean for you to get dragged into this. I didn't know everything. Her voice cracked, a fragile pane of glass shattering. "I didn't want to lose you." Kai's heart twisted, not with romance, but with a profound, aching sorrow for the innocence lost. "You already did," he said softly, the truth a bitter pill. Lena closed her eyes, fresh tears tracing paths down her cheeks. She reached into her worn jacket, pulling out a second, slightly larger flash drive. "This one," she whispered, her voice gaining a fragile strength, "contains the truth, recordings, meetings. Mom didn't know I kept backups. It proves what she did to your father, and what she planned for you." Kai's breath hitched. Why didn't you give me this earlier? Because I was terrified, Lena confessed, her gaze darting to the alley's mouth. She has eyes everywhere. She controls every facet of my life. If she realized I betrayed her. Kai finished, his jaw tight. She still might. Lena nodded, a grim understanding passing between them. She looked up at him, her eyes holding a fierce, desperate resolve. But you needed this more than I needed safety. Kai swallowed hard. Lena, after this, your mother will turn on you completely. She already has. Their eyes met. No love, no romance. Just two souls bound by the monstrous shadow of Evelyn Thorne. Kai stood, a new fire in his gaze. We need to get this to Aisha. Now Lena pushed herself upright, a flicker of defiance in her posture. Okay. He turned towards the alley's exit, but paused. Something felt wrong. Too quiet. He scanned the street, every instinct screaming danger. A sleek, black sedan was parked at the curb, lights off, engines silent, windows tinted. He felt Lena stiffen behind him, a silent gasp. It's them, she whispered, terror lacing her voice. No, Kai breathed, his hand instinctively going to her arm. Not yet. But someone is watching. Before he could decide whether to run or hide, the sedan's driver door opened. A woman stepped out. Not Evelyn, not a hired thug. Aisha. Kai exhaled, a mix of relief and confusion. Aisha, what are you doing here? She approached quickly, her face pale, jaw tight with urgency. I tracked your phone. When you didn't answer, I knew something was wrong. Something happened, didn't it? Kai nodded grimly. They attacked us. Aisha's eyes widened, scanning them both. Is anyone hurt? We're fine, Kai said, though his bruised ribs screamed in protest. Lena stepped into the faint light. Aisha's expression sharpened, a cold steel entering her gaze. You, Aisha said, her voice cutting through the night. Lena, you have a lot to answer for. Lena lowered her gaze, shame and defiance warring within her. I know. Kai held up the flash drive, a beacon of truth in the darkness. She has evidence, Aisha. Real evidence. Aisha's expression shifted, still wary, but now intensely focused. Then get in the car. Both of you. We don't have much time. Why? Kai demanded, his mind racing. Aisha unlocked the doors, her voice grim. Because Evelyn Thorne just filed a restraining order against you, Kai, and an accusation. Kai froze, the blood draining from his face. What accusation? Aisha looked him dead in the eyes, her voice a hammer blow. She's claiming you kidnapped her daughter. The world tilted violently. Lena gasped, a strangled cry. What? No, I came willingly. Aisha shook her head, her gaze unwavering. It doesn't matter what actually happened. She's controlling the narrative as we speak. We have one chance. One. If we don't get ahead of this tonight, Kai, you'll be thrown in jail by morning. Kai felt the truth settle like ice in his bones. The war wasn't coming. It was here. And Evelyn Thorne was no longer hiding in the shadows. She was hunting. Aisha drove like a woman possessed, navigating the labyrinthine city streets with a precision born of desperation, knowing exactly how fast she could push without drawing unwanted attention. Her knuckles were white, gripping the steering wheel as if her life, and theirs, depended on it. Kai sat in the passenger seat, breathing hard, the adrenaline still a frantic drumbeat in his veins from the parking lot ambush. Lena crouched in the back seat, arms wrapped tightly around herself, trembling, not from cold, but from the chilling realization of her mother's boundless ruthlessness, a power that twisted truth into a weapon. Kai stared out the window, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and blue, a distorted reflection of their shattered reality. Aisha's last words replayed in his mind, a venomous echo. She's claiming you kidnapped her daughter. The accusation crawled under his skin like poison, threatening to consume him. How bad is it? Kai finally asked, his voice low, rough with suppressed fury. Aisha didn't look at him, her eyes fixed on the road. Bad enough that there's already a bolo issued for your vehicle. What? Kai turned sharply, disbelief warring with dread. How? Why? Because Evelyn Thorne doesn't waste time, Aisha said, her voice clipped. The moment she realized Lena wasn't home, she made 2 calls, one to her PR team and one to law enforcement. She didn't just twist the story, Kai, she inverted it entirely. You're now the threat. You're the danger. Lena let out a small, pained sound from the back seat. This is my fault. I should have waited. I should have, I don't know, done something different. No, Kai said firmly, turning to face her, his eyes burning with conviction. This is her fault, Lena, not yours. Aisha's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, her expression grim. Lena, I need you to listen very carefully. If you come with us, publicly, on record, you'll blow apart your mother's narrative. But if she convinces the authorities that you're in danger, that you're a victim, they won't even listen to you. They'll assume you're coerced. Lena's throat tightened, a desperate fear in her eyes. They won't believe me. Not unless we give them a stronger story, Aisha said, her voice unwavering. Something irrefutable. Kai reached into his jacket, pulling out the flash drives, holding them up like a shield. This is irrefutable. Aisha took one hand briefly off the wheel, her fingers closing around the drives, a silent promise of justice. Elias, Amra's voice cut through the tense silence. Senator Thorne has masterfully twisted the narrative. You, Lena, are now painted as the aggressor, the unstable element. A tremor in Lena's voice. This is on me. I moved too fast. I should have, I don't know, waited. Elias's gaze was unwavering, turning toward her. No, Lena. This is her calculated deception, not your burden. Amra's sharp eyes darted to the rearview mirror, a silent warning of unseen watchers. Lena, listen closely, Elias urged, his voice low and firm. If you step forward now, publicly, your testimony will shatter Senator Thorne's carefully constructed empire of lies. But if she preemptively frames you as a victim of coercion, the system will dismiss you before you utter a single word. They won't even listen. Lena's voice, a desperate whisper. They'll never believe me, not without something irrefutable. Amara nodded grimly. Elias reached into his inner jacket pocket, his hand emerging with two sleek, encrypted flash drives, the truth, condensed, undeniable. Aisha didn't look at him, her eyes fixed on the road. Bad enough that there's already a bolo issued for your vehicle, clutching the drives like the very blueprints of freedom. If these contain what you both swear they do, Aisha's voice was a low hum of steel, then yes, they are our only hope. But I need to verify every byte, and I need to secure impenetrable backups. Before Senator Thorne even suspects a whisper of their absence, Elijah's hands clenched, a tremor of urgency. She already knows. Lena's voice was sharp, cutting through the tension as Aisha swerved onto a forgotten industrial road. Which is why we're not going to my office, or your apartment, or anywhere predictable. Aisha's jaw was set. Lena leaned forward, gripping the headrest, her knuckles white. Where are we going? Aisha exhaled slowly, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. To someone who owes me a debt older than time. 20 minutes later, they plunged into a district that felt like the city's forgotten conscience. Buildings leaned together like weary sentinels, their brick facades etched with stories. Streetlights flickering in a defiant rhythm. Aisha parked behind a shuttered community center, its mural of civil rights heroes faded but resolute. Elijah stared. This looks abandoned. That's the idea, Aisha replied, stepping out. She led them to a discreet side entrance, tapping a complex, rhythmic code. Locks clunked, a heavy bar scraped, and the door opened to reveal a man in his late 40s, eyes sharp beneath a hoodie, fingerless gloves hinting at a life lived on the digital frontier. Aisha, Jack said, stepping aside. Didn't expect you to knock on this door again. Didn't expect to need to, Aisha countered, her gaze unwavering. But here we are. Jax's eyes flicked to Elijah and Lena, assessing. Guests, temporary refugees. Aisha clarified. And we need your arsenal. All of it. He raised a skeptical brow. You're asking for a war chest. It's a war, Jax. Aisha crossed her arms, her voice a quiet challenge. And you owe me. He sighed, then gestured them in. Fine. Come inside. The building transformed. It wasn't a community center. It was a digital sanctuary. Old servers hummed with the pulse of hidden knowledge. Monitors glowed with streams of encrypted code. Tools lay scattered among gadgets Elijah couldn't name. This is Jax, Aisha introduced. One of the best digital architects I know. A guardian of forgotten truths. Ex-architect, Jax corrected, dropping into a swivel chair. Now I just ensure the wrong hands don't bury the stories that need to be told, the voices that need to be heard. Elijah's eyes widened. Why are we here? Because, Aisha said, if Senator Thorne is half as ruthless as I believe, she'll erase every digital footprint before we can even trace it. We need someone who can crack her systems faster than she can cover them up. Someone who can unearth the truth from the deepest shadows. Lena looked terrified. You think she knows the files are gone? Jack snorted. If she has half a brain, and from what I've heard, she's a strategic mastermind, she'll already be in full containment mode. Aisha placed the flash drives on the desk. Jax, we need everything off these drives, decrypted, duplicated, and backed up onto a system she can never breach. Jax whistled low. High-stakes real estate. You sure about this? I'm sure. Aisha affirmed. Do it. He hesitated. This might take a while. We don't have a while. Elijah interjected, his voice raw. She's already filed a false report. They're probably tracking my phone. Aisha nodded. Jax, shut down all external signals. We go dark. Jax typed a string of commands. The lights flickered, then stabilized. But the entire facility disconnected from the outside world. No signals in, no signals out. Welcome to the blackout, he said, a grim smile playing on his lips. While Jax worked, Aisha pulled Elijah aside. They stood in the shadow of stacked server racks, their voices hushed, a conspiracy of hope. Elijah, she's escalating too fast. Faster than even I anticipated. You need to brace yourself. For what? He asked, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm. For the possibility that Senator Thorne plans to destroy you publicly, to crucify your name before you can even bring your case to the light. Elijah frowned, a knot forming in his stomach. How? By shaping the narrative, Aisha said, her eyes burning with fierce resolve. By using Lena. He stiffened. Lena came willingly. That doesn't matter. Aisha countered. Thorne controls the media. She can flood the internet with manipulated footage, implying you're dangerous, obsessive, unhinged. Right now, she's painting a picture, and the more convincing that picture, the harder it will be to undo, to reclaim your truth. Elijah's jaw clenched so hard it ached. She's not unbeatable. No, Aisha agreed, her voice a whisper of steel, but she's undefeated. Elijah swallowed, the fear rising, but quickly replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Not for long. Aisha studied him for a moment, a flicker of pride in her eyes. Good. Because we're about to start a war. A public one. A war she's never had to fight. Before Elijah could respond, Jax's voice cut through the tense silence. Guys, he called, his voice strained. You're gonna wanna see this. They rushed over. Jax had one of the flash drives loaded on a monitor. Dozens of folders glowed on the screen, labeled with dates, project names, internal memos. Jax clicked open an audio file. Senator Thorne's voice filled the room. Cold, calculated, devoid of humanity. If Reverend Green won't sell, make him irrelevant. Discredit his work. Leak fabricated tax discrepancies. We only need public doubt, not proof. Lena gasped, covering her mouth, a silent scream. Another file opened. Use the daughter. If she can gain the son's trust, he'll sign anything. But make sure he doesn't know the ancestral land is worth 10 times the proposed offer. Elijah felt physically sick, a burning heat crawling up his neck, his heartbeat thundering like a war drum. That's enough, Aisha said tightly, her voice a low growl. Shut it off. Jax froze the screen. Lena stared at the floor, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't know, she whispered, her voice cracking. She said those things. I swear, Elijah. I never heard those recordings. Elijah couldn't speak, his throat constricted, rage and heartbreak blurring everything around him into a chaotic storm. But Jax wasn't done. He opened one final document. This one stamped private, legal strategy. It outlined a full smear campaign against Elijah. A timeline, talking points, prepared statements, even a list of targeted social media accounts. Lena's name appeared next to several damning items. Deny relationship, frame emotional instability, imply coercion. Lena stared in horror, her face draining of color. I had no idea. She forged half of that. She used my accounts without telling me. Elijah finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, but laced with an iron resolve. This isn't just about me anymore. This is about every voice she's silenced, every truth she's buried. His eyes met Aisha's, a silent vow passing between them. This is about justice. Aisha nodded, her gaze unwavering. And we will make sure the world hears it. Jax, his face grim, began typing, preparing to unleash the truth. The fight had just begun. The blackout was their sanctuary, and the truth, their weapon. The battle for dignity, for legacy, for the very soul of their community, was now in their hands. Senator Thorne orchestrated the suppression of our truth for years. Kale, Alara whispered, her hand a steady anchor on his shoulder. But now, we have the undeniable proof. A thunderous pounding erupted from the sanctuary's reinforced entrance. Jax's face drained of color. No one should know this place exists, he breathed. Alara's movements became a blur. Kale. Lena, behind the data vaults. Now, Lena's breath caught, a gasp of pure terror. Kale pulled her close, shielding her as he guided her behind the towering, humming metal archives. They melted into the whispering shadows, concealed by the rhythmic hum of the sanctuary's heart. Jax, with a flick of his wrist, muted every system, plunging them into a precarious silence. Alara snatched a heavy, cold wrench from a nearby console, her grip firm, almost practiced. The relentless pounding continued, a drumbeat of impending doom. Open the door. A guttural shout pierced the air. Enforcers. Lena's eyes widened, reflecting pure, unadulterated terror. Stay quiet. Alara's voice was a barely audible whisper, yet it cut through the chaos. A deeper, more commanding voice followed, resonating with cold authority. Search warrant for Kale Vance. Open this door, or we will force entry. The pounding intensified, a violent assault against their last bastion of hope. Kale gripped Lena's trembling hand, a silent promise of protection. She squeezed back, a lifeline in the storm. A chilling countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The reinforced door exploded inward. Splintering wood and metal, blinding beams of oppression flooded the sanctuary. Heavy boots thundered inside. Kale held his breath, every muscle tensed, as enforcers stormed through their sacred space, shouting commands, carelessly shattering their sanctuary. Lena trembled violently beside him, a fragile hope flickering in her eyes. A flashlight beam swept dangerously close, its cold light threatening to expose them. Alara stood at the center of the chaos, hands raised in a gesture of deceptive calm. Enforcers. What is the meaning of this intrusion? She demanded. We're searching for Kale Vance, the lead enforcer barked. Well, Alara replied, her voice a steel-edged whisper. You won't find the architect of this injustice here. The enforcer glared, his eyes burning with suspicion. We'll see about that. They tore through the room, a relentless hunt, flashlights inches from their faces. Kale braced himself, his breath held captive, for the inevitable moment of discovery. Lena silently, desperately prayed, and then a sudden, earth-shattering crash erupted from the far corner of the sanctuary. Metal shrieked, alarms blared. Hey, Jax shouted, his voice laced with feigned panic. The critical data core is overheating. Every enforcer spun towards the sound, their attention diverted. They rushed away from the data vaults. Kale looked at Lena, stunned, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. Jax winked, a glint of cunning in his eyes. That bought us seconds, not minutes, Alara whispered, leaning in, her voice barely audible above the rising chaos. When I tell you to run, take the passage of whispers. Don't stop until you reach freedom's embrace. Kale nodded, his jaw set. The chaos swelled, a maelstrom of confusion. Now, Alara's voice cut through the din. Kale grabbed Lena's hand, their fingers intertwined, as they slipped into the dark hallway. Shadows of defiance. Just as the enforcers turned back towards the data vaults, a voice barked, "Hey there." They were gone, swallowed by the whispering passage. Footsteps thundered behind them, echoes of pursuit. Kale and Lena ran through the dark, winding passage of whispers, towards the only hope they had left. The sacred burden of truth they now carried in their hands, and the unseen war for justice they could no longer escape. The passage of whispers was narrower than Kale had imagined, barely wide enough for one person to squeeze through sideways. Overhead, ancient pipes snaked, a metallic skeletal system. Dripping condensation hit the concrete with cold, rhythmic taps, like the tears of the forgotten. The air, thick and metallic, smelled of rust and the breath of forgotten ages. It felt like the very bowels of a forgotten world. Lena clutched his hand, her grip a desperate plea, her breathing shallow and fast. Behind them, the howls of the misled enforcers echoed through the sanctuary, growing more chaotic. Hurry! They went this way. The command ricocheted through the ancient walls. Cale pulled Lena forward, his urgency a silent scream. Keep moving, don't stop, not for anything, Cale urged. Lena's voice trembled. Where does this lead? I don't know, he admitted, but anywhere is better than back there. The passage sloped downward, a treacherous descent into the abyss of the unknown. Each step a gamble on the path of no return. Cale could hear the distant thunder of heavy boots behind them, muffled by the ancient concrete, yet growing closer. The system's relentless grip was closing in. These enforcers were trained, engineered to crush dissent, to confine truth. A cold dread coiled in Kel's chest. This wasn't just about arrest. Senator Thorne had twisted the narrative so insidiously, weaponizing truth itself. They believed Lena was a victim, and Cale, her captor. One wrong move, one fatal misstep, could get him killed. The passage eventually widened, emptying into a larger, echoing space, the subterranean veins, lined with ancient, sparking power conduits. Cale scanned desperately, his eyes darting, but there were no doors, no stairs, no visible path to freedom. Lena's voice cracked, a whisper of despair. We're trapped. No, we are not. Cale forced the words out, his voice a shield against the rising panic. Panic was a cage, and they would not be caught. There has to be something. Look, he ran his hand along the cold, damp wall, his fingers brushing against a heavy, metal hatch, bolted shut. He tried it. It didn't budge, an unyielding barrier. Can you open it? Lena whispered, her voice laced with fragile hope. Cale braced his foot against the wall, pulling with every ounce of his raw strength. The metal screamed in protest, but held firm. Sweat trickled down his spine, a cold testament to his struggle. He tried again, teeth bared, his will unbroken. Behind them, the echoes of pursuit grew louder. Check the subterranean veins. They couldn't have gone far. Lena pressed her palms together, visibly shaking. Cale, they're going to find us. He didn't respond. He couldn't afford to. His mind was a whirlwind, desperately scanning every corner, every ancient pipe, every hidden seam in the unforgiving wall. Then he saw it, a glimmer of salvation, a small, rusted vent cover, almost invisible beneath layers of grime. He crouched, pulled, and with a metallic shriek, the screws rattled and gave way. Behind it, a narrow, dark passage to uncertainty. Get in, he commanded. Lena hesitated, her eyes wide. What about you? I'll be right behind you. Go. Tears streaked down her cheeks, but she obeyed, squeezing her fragile frame into the hidden grate. Cale followed, pulling the hidden grate to freedom back loosely, masking their defiance. They crawled forward on their elbows, inch by agonizing inch. The rough metal scraped their skin, a small sacrifice. Darkness pressed around them, a suffocating embrace, the space tightening with every inch. Lena's breaths came in shallow, ragged bursts. I'm sorry, she whispered, a broken sound. Cale didn't answer, not because he didn't care, but because saving her, saving their truth, required every ounce of focus he had. Behind them, the subterranean veins filled with the thunder of approaching tyranny. Nothing, just the cold, dead air. Then a glint, a flashlight beam dancing on a loose vent cover. Elias froze. They went through here. Serafina whimpered, her voice a fragile thread. Elias reached back, his hand finding her ankle, a silent anchor. Keep crawling, he whispered, the words rasping in his throat. We're almost there. Behind them, the metallic shriek began. The officers were tearing at the vent. Rusty screws snapped, one by one, like bones breaking. Seconds, they had mere seconds before they'd be dragged back into the maw. But then light. A sliver of hope, ahead. A grate, at the very end of their suffocating tunnel. A way out. Serafina, kick it, Elias urged, his voice raw with desperation. She twisted, An awkward, desperate lunge. Her foot slammed against the grate. It rattled. A defiant tremor, again harder. The metal shrieked, then tore free. A gasp of frigid freedom rushed in. They tumbled out onto the jagged gravel slope behind the skeletal remains of the old foundry. Elias rolled to his feet, grabbed Serafina's hand, pulling her up. Shouts erupted from inside the vent, a furious roar. "They're outside! Move!" Blinding beams of flashlights began sweeping the exterior. Elias didn't think. He dragged Serafina toward a line of ancient, gnarled sentinels, pine trees. Bordering the lot, their branches formed a dense, dark canopy, nature's whispered promise of concealment. They ducked under the low branches just as officers spilled out of the building. A chilling net of surveillance. Serafina gasped, pressing a shaking hand to her heart. "What do we do now? We keep moving." Elias whispered, his eyes scanning the darkness, toward the Blackwater. They pushed through the trees, the sound of rushing water growing louder. A primal heartbeat in the night. The Blackwater River, a ribbon of defiance, carved a winding path between crumbling warehouses and a collapsed, barbed wire fence. Elias helped Serafina over the broken links, and they slid down the embankment, feet splashing into the numbing embrace of the icy current. "Are you sure?" Serafina began, her teeth chattering, but Elias cut her off. "The river washes away their trail, a silent accomplice." They waded through the Blackwater for nearly 10 minutes, until the shouts behind them faded into the vast, indifferent night. When they finally climbed out onto the far bank, Elias's legs burned with exhaustion and cold. But he didn't stop. They pushed forward into the forgotten district, where houses were spaced far apart, their streetlights flickering weakly like dying embers. Only once they reached the skeletal porch of a condemned home, its windows like vacant eyes, did Elias finally let himself collapse into a crouch. His chest heaved. Serafina sank beside him, wrapping her arms tightly around herself. This betrayal, I can't breathe. Her venom, it poisoned more than just my father, Serafina, Elias said, his voice raw. Stripped bare, it poisoned our very world. Serafina looked at him, her face a canvas of raw remorse. "Elias, about that, there's something I didn't tell you earlier." He didn't look at her. "What?" "The matriarch. She didn't destroy your father alone." "Not entirely." Every muscle in Elias's body tensed. His blood ran cold, a glacial dread. Slowly, he turned his head. "What does that mean?" Serafina stared at the weathered boards of the porch. Unable to meet his eyes, there was someone else involved. A shadow behind the throne, pulling strings. Someone who helped weave a tapestry of lies against him. Someone promised a position in exchange for cooperation. Elias's stomach sank. Serafina's voice was barely audible. "Silas." The name hit him like a seismic shockwave. "Silas Croft," Elias whispered, the name a bitter taste. Serafina nodded. "He began working with my mother years ago, long before he and I were pushed together. Their partnership wasn't romantic at first. It was transactional. He helped her twist the ledgers, bleed the truth dry around your father's shop. He created phantom accounts, conjured from the void, to make it look like your father was hiding money." Elias stared at her in stunned silence. "And now," Serafina continued, her voice cracking, "he's not just an investor. He's the architect of her empire, built on your father's ruin. Our engagement, mine and his, it's meant to be the final, grotesque seal on their unholy pact." Elias felt sick. "So he's been part of this the whole time, even before I met you?" "Yes," she whispered. "And he'll be a predator unleashed now. If he knows we have those flash drives, he won't stop until he destroys us." Elias stood abruptly, beginning to pace, pulling at his hair. A tempest of fury, betrayal, and cold, hard clarity raged within him. It was fire and gasoline colliding. "We need to warn Lena," he said finally. Serafina nodded. "We need to melt into the shadows first." But before they could plan their next move, a sound cut through the night, the crunch of tires on forgotten stones. A car, approaching slowly. Elias froze. Serafina's breath hitched. They backed deeper into the shadows of the porch as blinding beams sliced through the darkness, sweeping across the yard. For a terrifying moment, Elias thought it was the authorities again, or the matriarch's enforcers. But when the car stopped, and the door opened, a voice, rough with urgency, a lifeline, whispered harshly, "Elias, Serafina, get in, now." "Javier." They ran to the car, ducking low. Elias opened the door, ushered Serafina inside, then climbed in after her. Javier slammed the accelerator before the doors fully shut. Elias gripped the seat. "How did you find us?" Javier's jaw was tight. "Lena sent a coded message before the raid on the sanctuary. She said if the blackout failed, you'd head toward the Blackwater's edge. I drove the perimeter until I spotted movement. You're lucky I got there before they did." Serafina shivered. "Did they take Lena or Kale?" Javier shook his head. "Not sure. They might have detained them, or they might have let them go as a chilling message." Elias clenched his fists. "What now?" Serafina whispered. Javier's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, a steely glint in their depths. "Now, we assemble everything. We forge our narrative into an unbreakable shield, and we get ready for the one thing Matriarch Thorne never anticipated." Elias leaned in. "Which is?" Javier looked him dead in the eyes. "A crucible of justice. A court battle she can't manipulate. One where truth, raw and unyielding, will roar louder than any decree of her power." Elias exhaled slowly. In that moment, weariness warred with a surging, unshakable resolve. He knew the path ahead was a gauntlet of peril, a dance with death, but he also knew something else, for the first time in decades. The Thorne Empire, for all its might, had a fatal flaw. And he, Elias Vance, was the one thing they never anticipated, a survivor forged in fire, who would not be silenced, a beacon of defiance. Marcus's voice was a low rumble, Caleb's backups, if he managed to secure them before the raid. These files, they could dismantle an empire built on lies. Elijah gazed out, the city lights blurring into streaks as the car cut through the oppressive night. For too long, he'd walked in shadows. A shadow he didn't comprehend, a systemic weight he now understood with chilling clarity. And he was done being afraid, done being silent. Marcus navigated the labyrinth of forgotten backroads, silent, his hands steady on the wheel. Every turn, every empty intersection, seemed etched into his memory, a map of escape. He knew the paths least watched, the routes where the system's gaze faltered. Outside, the night pressed in, thick with a palpable tension, humming with the silent threat of pursuit. Elijah's eyes were fixed on the road ahead, the passing streetlights mere blurs against the encroaching darkness. Lena, huddled in the back seat between them, was a fragile silhouette. She clutched herself, her gaze riveted on the small, unassuming flash drive in Elijah's hand. It pulsed with the weight of their future, a beacon of truth, yet a potential curse. The silence stretched, taut as a violin string, until Lena's voice, a mere whisper, broke it. "What if they caught Imani? What if she's in custody? Because of me?" Marcus shook his head, a gesture of quiet confidence. "Imani knows how to navigate these storms. If the authorities had her, we would have heard. She's more valuable to Senator Thorne alive and silenced than vanished," Elijah added, his voice firm. "Imani is steel. Thorne won't break her spirit." Lena swallowed, unconvinced. The brutal attack in the parking lot, the desperate chase, the chilling revelation of the hidden files. It had all laid bare her terrifying unpreparedness for the true monstrousness of her own mother. She had grown up within Thorne's gilded cage, but never truly understood its systemic cruelty, its crushing weight, until this very moment. Finally, Marcus guided the car down a winding, unpaved track, deep into the heart of an ancient forest, pulling up to a small, remote cabin. Elijah recognized it from Marcus's hushed stories. A sanctuary, he'd called it, a haven for when the world turned against you. "You'll be safe here." "For tonight," Marcus declared, cutting the engine. "Safe," Lena whispered, her voice laced with raw fear. "How can we be safe anywhere when the hounds of power are at our heels?" Marcus leaned in, his gaze steady. "Because Senator Thorne doesn't know I still hold the deed to this land, and she doesn't possess the access keys to the encrypted archives Caleb and I secured moments before the storm broke." He turned to Elijah. "Caleb finished a duplicate set. He hid them deep before the raid. I retrieved them." A profound weight, a crushing burden, lifted from Elijah's chest. "So the truth isn't lost," Elijah breathed. No, Marcus affirmed, but it's a double-edged sword. The moment we unleash any of this, Senator Thorne will activate her full apparatus of destruction. She knows if even a fraction of this truth reaches the courts or the public square, she's finished. Criminally, financially, socially, Lena sank onto a worn, faded sofa, trembling. She won't stop, Marcus. You don't know her. She'll burn down the very foundations of this city before she allows her empire to crumble. We're not giving her that choice, Elijah said, his voice a quiet, unyielding force. He placed the flash drive on the rough-hewn coffee table. Its tiny form, unassuming yet potent, seemed to glow in the cabin's warm lamplight. The detonator to a bomb of truth, already ticking. Marcus produced Caleb's encrypted archives, lining them up beside it. Between the audio recordings, the damning emails, the internal memos, the project strategies, we hold enough evidence to expose a decade of systemic corruption. But we must build this case with meticulous precision. Thorne's legal machine is ruthless. One misstep, and she'll twist the narrative, dismantle the chain of custody, or cry fabrication. Elijah nodded, grimly. So what's the next move? Elijah asked. We go public, Marcus stated, but not yet. First, we must unequivocally establish your innocence. If the world still believes the lie that you abducted Lena, this evidence will be dismissed. They'll claim coercion, manipulation. Lena looked up, her eyes flashing with resolve. Then I'll testify. I'll go to the authorities myself and tell them the truth. No, Marcus's voice was sharp, immediate. You'll be detained, isolated. Silence before you can even reach a lawyer. Senator Thorne's influence will reach you first. Lena's voice cracked, despair creeping in. So what do we do? Imani's name, a beacon of strategic brilliance, flashed in Elijah's mind. Her calm voice amidst the storm, her razor-sharp legal mind. We need her, Elijah declared. We need Imani to navigate this legal battlefield. Marcus nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes, if they haven't already taken her. Elijah clenched his jaw. Then we find her. For the next agonizing hour, they tried to reach Imani. Using a secure burner phone Marcus kept hidden in the sanctuary. No answer. Elijah tried again and again, each unanswered ring a fresh stab of dread. Maybe she's hiding, Lena whispered, hope fading. Or detained, Marcus said grimly. Elijah paced the small cabin, a caged lion. No, she wouldn't leave us without a sign. She promised to contact me if anything went wrong. She wouldn't stay silent unless she was. He stopped mid-sentence, the unspoken word hanging heavy in the air. Compromised. Before panic could fully seize them, Marcus's burner phone buzzed. All three jumped, a collective gasp. Marcus answered, his voice tight with caution. Hello? A rushed, strained whisper. Marcus, it's Imani. Elijah's knees nearly buckled. Lena clutched her hands, a silent prayer escaping her lips. Thank God. Where are you? Marcus demanded. I got away, Imani whispered, barely. They detained Caleb. I slipped out through a service exit moments before they sealed the perimeter. Elijah's stomach twisted with a cold dread. Is Caleb? Is he okay? He was alive when I last saw him. Imani's voice was grim, but they took him. Senator Thorne will interrogate him. We must assume she has already breached his systems. Marcus exhaled slowly. That's why the sanctuary is offline. No digital trace. Good, Imani affirmed. Stay dark. I'm heading to a secure location. I'll send coordinates once I'm truly safe. Is there anything else we should know? Elijah pressed, a knot forming in his gut. A long, agonizing pause. Too long. Then Imani's voice dropped, a chilling whisper that cut through the line. Senator Thorne didn't just file a kidnapping accusation. She filed a protective order, preventing you, Elijah, from contacting or approaching Lena in any capacity. That's absurd. Lena burst out. I'm right here. It doesn't matter. Imani's voice was laced with grim reality. Legally, it paints Ethan as a threat to the public, a danger. If you appear with him, even willingly, they can arrest him on sight. Vanessa's hands flew to her mouth, a silent scream. Ethan felt the world tilt, a sickening lurch. They're trying to sever our connection, isolate you. Maya's voice cut through the despair. Classic tactic. Miranda knows your unity threatens her carefully constructed narrative. She's cutting every communication thread, so when you finally speak, no one will believe you. Daniel cursed, a low, guttural sound. What do we do? Maya inhaled sharply. A warrior preparing for battle. I need the backups, all of them. If Miranda controls the narrative first, this becomes unwinnable. Daniel assured her. They're safe, every single one. Maya nodded. Good. Maya whispered, her voice a steel thread. Then listen closely. There's only one way to counter Miranda's acceleration. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. Knuckles white. Tell us, he urged. You go to court before she does. Silence descended, heavy and absolute. Vanessa blinked. What does that mean? It means, Maya declared, you file your own legal complaint first. A preemptive strike. If we frame the case correctly, if we present the evidence with proper timestamps and an ironclad chain of custody, the court will issue a stay order. It will prevent law enforcement from acting on that fabricated accusation until the truth, the real truth, is evaluated. Will it work? Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. It's risky, Maya admitted, her gaze unwavering, but it's the only move that traps Miranda. Instead of you. Daniel nodded slowly, a grim resolve settling on his face. We'll do it. Maya's voice softened, a rare moment of vulnerability. Ethan, you did nothing wrong. But the law doesn't care about truth. It cares about paperwork, timing, and who speaks first. Miranda knows that, and now, so do we. We'll meet you. Wherever you are, Ethan affirmed, his voice firm. I'll send coordinates in 30 minutes. She replied, stay hidden. And Ethan, be ready. When we go to court, everything comes out. Everything. Once this starts, there's no turning back. I understand, Ethan said. And he meant it with every fiber of his being. The call ended. The room felt heavier now, not with fear, but with an unyielding purpose. Daniel unrolled a faded map of the city. Vanessa wiped her tears, her spine straightening, a new strength radiating from her. Ethan felt something shift deep inside him, an anchor dropping, a resolve hardening into granite. For weeks he'd been reacting, running, surviving. But now he had a plan, unwavering allies, irrefutable proof, and a chance to bring down the woman who had systematically dismantled to generations of his family's legacy. He looked at Vanessa. Are you sure you want to do this? She nodded, her voice steady for the first time all night. I'm done being her puppet. She took my father, his softness, his hope, his independence. She stripped him of his dignity. I won't let her take you. Ethan swallowed hard. Then Daniel spoke the words none of them had dared to utter. This ends soon, one way or another. They stayed awake, fueled by adrenaline and a shared vision, until Maya's coordinates arrived. A courthouse, not tomorrow, not next week, tonight. At dawn, Ethan would walk into the lion's den, the truth clutched in his hands, a storm of justice gathering behind him, and Miranda Hart, queen of manipulation, the architect of systemic destruction, would finally face the force she had underestimated most, the unyielding, undeniable truth she had tried so desperately to bury. The courthouse loomed over the city, a monolithic monument carved from centuries of battles, its stone columns cold, towering, and utterly indifferent to the fear of those who walked towards its formidable gates. Dawn had barely begun to tint the sky, painting the horizon with muted streaks of bruised gray and lavender. The world was quiet at this hour, but Ethan felt anything but calm. He stood beside Daniel and Vanessa in the deep shadow of the courthouse steps, his hands buried in his jacket pockets, not just for warmth, but to steady their tremble. They wore nondescript clothing, hoods, plain coats, dark pants, not out of fear, but strategy. Miranda had eyes everywhere. Showing up unnoticed was their last, fragile advantage. Vanessa looked up at the imposing structure, her breath visible in the biting morning air. I never thought I'd come here, to fight her. You're not fighting her alone, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the tremor that still ran through his core. Daniel checked his watch. Maya should be here any minute. As if summoned by her own name, a sleek black sedan turned onto the street, slowing near the curb. A familiar figure stepped out. Maya, composed despite the exhaustion etched around her eyes. She carried a worn leather briefcase, Clutched so tightly, it seemed fused to her hand. She approached them, her stride purposeful. "We don't have much time." Miranda's lawyers filed additional motions overnight. "They're moving aggressively." "What kind of motions?" Ethan demanded, his jaw tight. "The kind meant to crush you before sunrise." Maya replied, her voice clipped. "A petition for a permanent restraining order. An emergency injunction. Transferring control of your ancestral land to a holding company. And a sealed complaint implying you're mentally unstable." Vanessa's expression twisted with raw disgust. "How is she doing all this at 4 a.m? She doesn't sleep when she's threatened." Maya said, a grim smile touching her lips. "But neither do I." She gestured towards the courthouse doors. "I've prepared a counterfiling. It includes the initial evidence, a sworn affidavit from me detailing her tactics, and a sealed protective request. Once we submit this, the court must halt her motions until a hearing is set." "And what about the fabricated accusation?" Ethan asked, his gaze fixed on Maya. Maya's eyes sharpened. "That depends on Vanessa." Vanessa stepped forward without hesitation, her chin held high. "I'll testify. I'll tell them everything, and I'll argue," Maya added, "that Miranda's accusation was a retaliatory tactic, a desperate attempt to silence a potential whistleblower exposing her systemic corruption. Is that enough?" Ethan pressed. "It will be," Maya said, her voice ringing with conviction. "Once we file the full evidence packet, we're about to hit her where she's weakest. Documented truth." Ethan nodded, a fierce determination in his eyes. "Let's do it." They entered the courthouse. The cold marble floors echoed under their footsteps, each sound amplified in the cavernous space. The building felt still, suspended in the early morning quiet, as if the very walls themselves were waiting to witness something historic. Deep within the labyrinthine courthouse, Anya guided them to a nondescript clerk's window, a silent battleground where fates were sealed with a stamp. A lone, weary clerk, guardian of the bureaucratic gate, barely registered their presence. Sipping an oversized coffee, half asleep, Anya approached with the quiet ferocity of a storm. "I need these motions filed. Immediately." The clerk blinked, startled, at the formidable stack of documents Anya placed before him. All of this. Every single page," Anya affirmed, her voice unwavering. "And I require confirmation copies." As the clerk processed the filings, each resounding stamp felt like a hammer blow against Serafina Thorne's empire. Cale watched the papers vanish into the official archives, irreversible, untouchable, now protected by the very system they sought to manipulate. When the final stamp fell, Anya exhaled, a whisper of triumph. "It's done." But the relief was a fleeting mirage. The heavy courthouse doors behind them burst open, slamming against the marble. Two impeccably dressed lawyers swept in, flanked by 3 sharply suited security personnel. The first lawyer, Mr. Sterling, a man with a gaze as cold and predatory as a winter night, spotted Anya instantly. "Miss Sharma," he purred, his voice a silken blade. "What a surprise." Anya didn't flinch. "Mr. Sterling," his expression tightened, a flicker of irritation. "You are interfering in a delicate matter, involving the Thorne family," he finished. "No," Anya corrected, her voice cutting through his. "I am preventing the abuse of the legal system." Sterling's icy stare flicked to Cale. "Mr. Vance, you are in violation of a protective order." "There is no valid order," Anya snapped, stepping forward. "We filed counter motions that supersede your client's tactics." Sterling merely smirked. "We'll see what the judge says." He gestured to a woman behind him, Serafina Thorne's second attorney. She stepped forward, a malicious smile playing on her lips. "Miss Thorne is willing to settle," she announced, "if Cale signs a transfer of his land and agrees to a cease and desist." Regarding her daughter, Lena stepped forward, her small frame trembling, but her eyes blazing. "I am not her property." The attorney's smile faltered. "Lena, your mother is worried sick." "Stop lying," Lena cried, her voice breaking but imbued with a fierce strength. "She wants to silence me." Sterling's eyes narrowed. "Careful. Young lady, you're walking into defamation." "Defamation?" Cale barked, his voice raw with indignation. "She tried to erase us." Sterling waved a dismissive hand. "Baseless claims." Anya stepped directly between them, a human shield. We'll let the court decide." The lawyers turned away, their retreat a calculated maneuver. But not before Sterling delivered one last, chilling whisper to Cale. "You're playing with giants, Mr. Vance, and giants don't fall." He walked off, his words hanging heavy in the air. Anya let out a long, shuddering breath. "We need to leave, now, before they escalate." They exited through a side hallway. The morning sun was rising, casting long shadows as the courthouse interior began to fill with the daily tide of attorneys and clerks. Cale felt his chest tighten, a drumbeat of urgency. Every second mattered now, outside. Anya stopped abruptly. "We're not safe here anymore." "Where do we go?" Lena asked, her voice small, neutral ground. Anya replied, "Someplace public enough to prevent confrontation, but private enough to plan our next move." But before they could take another step, a voice broke through the air like a crack of thunder. "Cale Vance, don't move." They spun around. 5 police officers, a phalanx of authority, blocked the stairs. Weapons were not drawn, but hands were poised near holsters. Lena froze. A gasp caught in her throat. "No, no, please." Cale lifted his hands slowly, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm. "Officers, please. There's been a misunderstanding." The lead officer stepped forward, his face grim. "Turn around." "Sir, we have a warrant for your arrest." Anya squeezed Cale's arm, her voice a fierce whisper. "Don't resist. Let me handle this." Javier positioned himself protectively beside Lena. Cale swallowed, his throat tight. "May I ask what the warrant is for?" The officer's expression was flat. "Practiced harassment, defamation, and violation of a protective order." Lena stepped forward, her voice rising. "He didn't violate anything." "I'm here of my own, ma'am," the officer said calmly, cutting her off. "We've been informed you're under duress." "That's not true," Lena cried, tears welling. "My mother lied, ma'am," the officer repeated, his tone hardening. "Please, step back." Lena looked helplessly at Cale, her eyes pleading. Anya spoke sharply. "Officers, filings were submitted minutes ago." "That override. They're not processed in the system yet," the lead officer said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Our orders stand." Cale felt something break inside him. Not fear, not anger, but a profound, almost sacred calm. This was Serafina's final gambit, her desperate attempt to crush the truth before it could breathe. He turned toward Anya, a silent message in his eyes. "Do it." She nodded, understanding instantly. Lena grabbed Cale's arm, her voice a desperate plea. "Please don't go, please. This is my fault. I never should have." He placed a hand over hers, gently removing her grip. "This isn't your fault. None of it." "Cale, listen to me." His voice trembled, but he forced the words out, steady and clear. "You're free now. You get to choose who you are, what you stand for. Don't let her take that from you again." Lena sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "I'm scared." "So am I," Cale admitted, a ghost of a smile. "But we're not alone, not anymore." Javier stepped forward, his jaw set. "We'll get you out. I swear it." Cale nodded. A silent promise exchanged. Then he faced the officers. "I'm ready." They cuffed him gently, not like a criminal, but like someone they weren't sure they understood. As they led him toward the police car, Cale heard Enya's voice carry after him, sharp and unbreakable, a beacon in the gathering storm. "This isn't over." He didn't look back, but he felt it, a tremor in the earth, the unstoppable march of truth. And when that truth finally broke, Serafina Thorne's empire, built on shadows and lies, would crumble under the unforgiving light. In the end, the story wasn't just about betrayal or corruption. It was about the quiet, unyielding resilience that grows inside someone who has been beaten down again and again, yet still finds the strength to rise. Cale learned that justice is rarely swift and almost never clean, but it becomes possible the moment we refuse to let fear dictate our choices. Lena discovered that breaking free from a lifetime of control requires courage far greater than obedience, and together, they proved that truth, like a river, will always find its way to the sea. But the truth, when fiercely protected and fearlessly spoken, possesses the power to dismantle even the most insidious, systemic lies. Their unwavering courage, their relentless fight, reminds us never underestimate the seismic power of one voice, one stand, especially when you are the first to rise against the tide. If this journey ignited a spark within your soul, let your voice be heard in the comments below. Join our growing movement. Subscribe to witness more stories of resilience, more triumphs of the human spirit. Because here, your voice isn't just heard, it's a vital force, a beacon in the ongoing fight for a more just world.